Welcome to our retelling of The Magician, Apprentice by Raymond E. Feist, the first book of the Riftwar Saga. Please sit back and relax as we take you beyond the Billabong. Chapter 1, Waves of Fate. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a restless sea and a young boy named Pug, who danced precariously along the rocky coastline. His eyes darted keenly into tide pools, seeking creatures displaced by the storm. The sun warmed his back, and Pug felt the familiar comfort of the sea spray on his skin. As he set his sack of crabs and sandcrawlers down upon the rocks, he fell into a deep sleep beneath the sun's embrace. He awoke some time later with a start as a wet spray hit his face. Dark thunderheads loomed ominously on the horizon, heralding another storm. The crashing waves against the bluffs of Sailor's Grief were a stark reminder of the sea's fury. Hastily, Pug gathered his sack and headed for the safety of the castle. But the storm was swift, and the tide surged, reducing the dry sand to a mere strip. Navigating the rocks with growing urgency, Pug misstepped, twisting his ankle. A wave engulfed him, wrenching the sack from his grip. Desperately, he lunged for it, only to find himself submerged again. The waves were relentless, and panic clawed at him. He struggled to shore, clinging to the cliff face as the storm threatened to pull him back. With sheer determination, Pug clawed his way up the path, his ankle throbbing in protest. He reached the bluffs, collapsing on the grass, rain now a constant companion. Examining his ankle, he was relieved to find it not broken, though the journey to the castle would be arduous. The gates would surely be closed by the time he arrived, and climbing the wall was out of the question with his injury. As the rain intensified, Pug cursed his misfortune. The lost sack of crawlers would earn him the cook's ire, and his folly in falling asleep weighed heavily on him. Yet, he pushed on, gathering his belongings, only to find his rucksack torn and his provisions gone, victim to opportunistic raccoons or sand lizards, no doubt. With a deep breath, Pug leaned on his staff and limped across the hills toward the road. The wind bit into his wet clothes, urging him to move faster. The ominous sounds of the forest to the east were unsettling, tales of outlaws and other dangers playing on his mind. He sought shelter in the roadside gully, but the storm was unyielding, a force of nature pressing him onward. Nearly an hour passed, the storm growing in ferocity. Lightning split the sky, and thunder rumbled like a beast. Pug's resolve wavered, fear of the storm now surpassing any imagined threats from the forest. Seeking shelter among the trees, he was startled by a crashing sound. A black forest boar emerged, eyes wild with panic. The boar charged, and Pug swung his staff in defense. The blow deflected the beast, but not enough to prevent it from bowling him over. On the ground, Pug braced for the worst, but the boar suddenly relented, laying still, an arrow protruding from its side. A man in brown leather stood nearby, wrapping his bow.
"Are you right, boy?"
The man called over the wind, helping Pug to his feet. Pug nodded, grateful for the intervention. The man introduced himself as Meacham, a franklin.
"Come with me, boy. Best lodge with us tonight,"
he urged, leading Pug through the storm to a cottage nestled in the trees. Inside, the warmth was immediate, a stark contrast to the storm's fury. A fire crackled in the hearth, and a figure in yellow robes sat at the table.
"Close that door, boy. You'll give me a chill."
Pug obeyed, recognizing the man as Kulgan, the Duke's magician.
"Master Kulgan,"
he began. Kulgan waved his pipe.
"No need for master, Pug. Come, dry yourself by the fire."
As Pug hung his clothes, he noticed a drake near the magician.
"Is he truly a dragon?"
Pug asked, wide-eyed. Kulgan chuckled.
"A fire drake, cousin to the dragon. Fantis won't harm you."
Pug admired the creature, its scales glinting in the firelight. Meacham returned, setting a spit of pork to roast. The cottage was a haven, safe from the storm outside. Conversation turned to Pug's future, and he expressed his hope to join the Duke's service as a squire.
You're a bit small for a sword, aren't you?
Meacham teased. Pug flushed.
I might be late to my growth, they say. No one knows who my parents were, so no one knows what to expect.
Coogan, with a thoughtful gaze, shared tales of the land's history, of empires and kingdoms. Pug was entranced, but hunger soon diverted his attention to the roasting pork. As they dined, Pug felt the warmth of the cottage seep into his bones. Coogan questioned him about his plans, and Pug revealed his hope to train under Swordmaster Fannin. As the evening wore on, Pug's eyelids grew heavy. Coogan and Meacham prepared a bed for him, and Pug quickly succumbed to sleep, Fantis curling beside him. The storm raged on, but within the cottage, all was calm. Pug slept soundly, the warmth of the fire and the companionship of the Drake comforting him. In the morning, the world would be a different place. The storm, a mere memory. But for now, Pug was safe, nestled in the heart of the forest, with the promise of new beginnings on the horizon. The forest whispered with the gentle breath of the afternoon breeze, which danced among the towering oaks, providing a welcome respite from the day's lingering warmth. Pug and Thomas strolled leisurely along the path, their steps languid and carefree, like boys unburdened by time or destination. They had been banished from the kitchen earlier, their youthful exuberance proving more disruptive than helpful. Pug, with a sheepish grin, confessed.
I made something of a fool of myself today, Thomas.
Thomas, ever the optimist, chuckled.
You were no more the fool than I. At least you didn't forget to hang the beef sides high.
The memory of the Duke's hounds feasting on the unattended beef brought laughter to both boys, dispelling any lingering embarrassment. They wandered toward the forest, slings in hand, hoping a brace of birds might redeem them in the eyes of Thomas's mother. With the stealth of hunters, they crept through the sun-dappled woods, their imaginations easily transforming the familiar landscape into a realm of high adventure. As they approached a small rise overlooking a watering pool, Thomas stopped abruptly and whispered,
Pug, look.
An old stag, crowned with magnificent antlers, stood by the pool. The boys watched in awe, not daring to move, lest they disturb the serene beauty of the moment. Emerging from the forest's edge came Martin Longbow, the Duke's huntmaster. Tall and clad in forest hues, he approached the stag with a quiet confidence. The stag, recognizing the man, nuzzled Martin's arm affectionately.
If you walk out slowly, without speaking, he might let you approach,
Martin advised the boys. Tentatively, they stepped into the clearing. Thomas reached out first, his fingers trembling as they brushed the stag's coat. Pug followed, feeling the life beneath the fur. The stag, however, soon retreated, disappearing into the trees with a graceful leap. Martin chuckled.
Just as well. Those antlers would quickly end up over some poacher's fireplace.
The boys were captivated by Martin, whose life seemed filled with tales of adventure and mystery. Pug's curiosity got the better of him.
You haven't been in the keep for nearly a month, Martin,
he ventured. Martin regarded him with a slight smile, dispelling Pug's embarrassment.
I've been to Elvendar,
he replied.
Queen Aglarana has ended her mourning for the Elf King. There was a great celebration.
The mention of Elvendar and the elves stirred a mix of awe and disbelief in Pug. To him, elves were creatures of legend, yet Martin spoke of them as acquaintances. Thomas, ever fascinated by such tales, eagerly asked.
Did you know King Aiden?
Martin's expression darkened briefly.
No, I never met him, but he was a good and wise king by all accounts.
With a glance at the sun, Martin said,
It approaches noon. We should return to the keep.
Back in the courtyard of the keep, the air buzzed with the nervous energy of the boys assembled for the choosing. Pug, in his newly altered tunic, stood among them, acutely aware of the importance of the day. Today marked the end of their boyhood, a transition into apprenticeships that would shape their futures. The Duke's herald announced the arrival of Duke Boric Condoin, a figure of commanding presence, followed by his sons, Princes Liam and Arutha, each embodying different aspects of their father's complex nature. Liam, with his blonde hair and open smile, exuded warmth and charisma, while Arutha, dark-haired and quick-witted, possessed a sharpness that commanded respect. The Princess Carline, graceful and poised, joined them, her presence a reminder of the late Duchess's beauty and elegance. All eyes were on the royal family as the ceremony began, each boy secretly hoping for a nod of approval from the Duke or his sons. Pug's heart raced as the names were called, one by one, each boy stepping forward to accept his place in the Duke's service. Thomas, as expected, was called first by Swordmaster Fannin, a choice that filled him with pride and relief. Pug watched his friend's joy, a mix of happiness and anxiety churning within him. Amid the formality, a ripple of surprise spread through the crowd as Robert, a netmender's son, stepped forward to seek release from service, choosing instead the life of a sailor, a bold move and one that left an impression on Pug. As the list dwindled, Pug felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down. He was acutely aware of the unchosen boys who stood with him, their hopes pinned on the remaining opportunities. The fear of being left unchosen, of facing the shame of dismissal, gnawed at him, but he steeled himself against despair. A heavy silence descended upon the courtyard, the weight of unfulfilled hopes pressing down on the orphan boy. It seemed no master had chosen him. But just as resignation began to settle in, Kulgan, the magician, stepped forward, a figure often shrouded in mystery, now standing as Pug's unexpected savior.
I have need of an apprentice.
Kulgan announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs.
I would call Pug, orphan of the keep, to service.
The Duke, recognizing Kulgan's right, offered Pug the choice, and with a mixture of surprise and relief, the boy accepted, albeit clumsily, his new path as an apprentice magician. The day shifted from anxiety to celebration as the festival of Bannerpiece unfolded. The courtyard transformed into a scene of festivity, tables groaning under the weight of food and drink. The intoxicating aroma of hot pies and the rich bitterness of dwarven ale filled the air. Pug, now clad in a fine new tunic, basked in the camaraderie of the festival, the earlier tension dissolved in the warmth of shared laughter and ale. He and Thomas, both in their newfound roles, navigated the bustling courtyard, their spirits lifted by the festive atmosphere. The boys were quick and clever, snatching morsels from the laden tables, their youthful exuberance unchecked. Music and merriment swept through the keep as jugglers and clowns entertained the gathering crowd, each performance a reminder of the world's wonders beyond the walls of Crydee. The Duke and his family mingled freely, the usual distinctions of rank forgotten amidst the celebration. Princess Carline, radiant in her blue gown, captivated the hearts of many a boy, their infatuation as much a part of the festival as the food and drink. As the evening drew on, Pug found himself contemplating the day's events. Despite the uncertainty of his new apprenticeship, a sense of rightness settled over him. He was surrounded by friends and embraced by the warmth of the community, his future now tied to the enigmatic world of magic under Kulgan's tutelage. Chapter 2, The Squire of Crydee. Pug sat sulking on his sleeping pallet, his thoughts spiraling around his current predicament. Fantus, the fire drake, sensing no relief from Pug's inattentive scratches, snorted a small puff of black smoke and took to the air, leaving Pug alone with his worries. Despite the sea breeze wafting through the window and the sun warming his legs, Pug felt trapped in his own frustration. 14 months into his apprenticeship with Kulgan, Every attempt at magic seemed to crumble at his feet. He couldn't understand it. In theory, he was adept, quick to grasp the fundamental concepts of spellcasting. Yet, when it came to practical application, something within him balked, refusing to let him cross the threshold into true magic. Kulgan, ever patient, reassured him that it would all come together in time, but Pug found little solace in those words. His brooding was interrupted by Father Tully, the priest entering with a gentle rustle of his robes.
Pug, it's time for your writing lesson.
Tully paused, noting the boy's disheartened demeanor.
What's the matter, lad?
Pug, though fond of the old priest, couldn't contain his frustration.
I don't know, Father. Everything I try, I manage to make a mess of.
Father Tully, with a patient hand on Pug's shoulder, suggested they postpone the lesson.
Tell me what is troubling you, and we can practice writing some other time.
He offered, settling onto a stool by the window. Pug hesitated, but eventually confessed.
I mastered the basic cantrips months ago. I can calm my mind with little effort, but beyond that, everything falls apart. It's like there's something in my head, demanding I do things differently. Each time I try a simple spell, I lose control.
Tully listened intently, then spoke.
Magic has many properties, Pug, and we understand little of it. Even magicians don't fully grasp it. They just know how to work it.
Pug sighed, unconvinced.
I hope you're right, Father. I just don't understand what's wrong with me.
I think I know what's wrong.
Kulgan's voice cut through the room, startling them both. The magician's eyes were steady, filled with concern.
Boys who sit in their rooms worrying make things not work. You need a rest. Go find some trouble to get into.
Relief washed over Pug as Kulgan playfully cuffed his head, sending him scampering down the stairs. Once alone with Tully, Kulgan confessed.
There's no explanation why he cannot perform the skills I've taught. He has such gifts, but this inability to use inner powers, it's baffling.
Do you think you can find a solution?
Tully asked, his brow furrowed with concern.
I hope so. I'd hate to release him from apprenticeship. There is something inside that boy's head, something powerful, but it rejects my exercises.
Tully pondered, then suggested.
Have you thought of the lost art?
Kulgan dismissed it as legend, yet Tully was firm.
We of the temple do not count it legend, Kulgan. It's part of the revealed truth, taught by the gods to the first men.
Kulgan, though skeptical, listened as Tully explained the Ashapians' belief in the lost art, their historical records vast and ancient. Despite his disbelief, a seed of thought was planted.
How did the first magicians learn to use their power?
Tully mused. Kulgan's eyes lit up with an idea.
What if no one had chosen to teach him?
He pondered.
Could Pug be one of those rare talents, needing a different path?
Tully watched him, intrigued.
So, what do you have in mind?
I'm not sure yet, but you may have given me an idea.
Kulgan replied, his mind racing. As the sound of boys playing filled the courtyard, both men sat in silent contemplation, the question of Pug's potential hovering in the air like an unsolved riddle, waiting for the right moment to reveal its answer. Every 6th day at the castle, the air was alive with youthful exuberance as the boys and girls found a brief respite from their chores. The courtyard became a battleground for the boys, where a rough and tumble game of tag played out with a leather ball and fierce determination. Thomas, with his sandy hair flying like a banner, was always at the heart of the chaos, his laughter a wild, joyous sound. Pug, eager to join, dashed into the fray just in time to thwart Rolf's attempt at a sneak attack on Thomas. This intervention led to a confrontation that quickly spiraled into a scuffle between Pug and Rolf. Rolf, with his bulk and bluster, soon had Pug pinned, raining blows down on him. Thomas, the loyal friend, could only watch helplessly driven by a code of honor that forbade interference. As Pug's world began to blur with pain, salvation came in the unlikely form of Prince Arutha. With a firm grip, the prince hoisted Rolf off Pug, his voice a cold command, as he admonished the bully. As Rolf slunk away, Prince Arutha helped Pug to his feet, a wry smile on his lips.
We can't have the wits beaten out of the duchy's finest young magician, can we?
He quipped, leaving Pug to grapple with the humiliation of his defeat in front of the Princess Carline. That evening, Pug and Thomas took their dinner outside, seeking solace in the cooling sea breeze. As Thomas devoured his meal with characteristic gusto, Pug nursed his bruises and his wounded pride.
I should have kept my temper.
He lamented. Thomas, ever pragmatic, replied.
Master Fannin says a soldier must keep a cool head at all times.
Yet, despite his friend's assurances, Pug couldn't shake off the sting of being bested, especially in front of the princess. Their conversation soon meandered into more personal territories, with Thomas admitting his affection for a girl named Neela. Pug, surprised by his friend's vulnerability, teased him gently.
She probably likes you too,
he assured Thomas, when the older boy expressed concern over his obvious affection. The talk of girls and marriage soon began to unsettle Pug.
I don't know if magicians are allowed marry.
He mused, the thought vague and foreign to him. As the stars twinkled above, Thomas turned serious.
Sometimes I think this will all somehow change,
He confessed, his voice tinged with a rare note of uncertainty. Pug, alarmed by his friend's somber mood, vowed.
We will be friends no matter what.
Thomas's smile returned, and the two boys sat in companionable silence, sharing dreams beneath the castle's watchful walls. The next morning, Pug's face was a tapestry of bruises, a testament to the previous day's skirmish. Kulgan, the magician, entered, his presence a comforting weight. He spoke kindly, recognizing Pug's frustration.
You must put your energies to better use,
He advised, suggesting a new approach to Pug's education. This reprieve from formal lessons was both a relief and a challenge for Pug, who feared he was beyond help. Kulgan reassured him.
Your apprenticeship is for 9 more years. Don't be put off by the failures of the last few months.
Then came unexpected news. Pug was to learn to ride, a privilege and a duty, as he was chosen to accompany the Princess Carline when needed. The prospect filled Pug with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Riding lessons were a rare opportunity, usually reserved for the noble-born, and the thought of spending time with the princess was both thrilling and terrifying. With Kulgan's encouragement, Pug rushed to the stables, his heart pounding with anticipation. The thought of learning to ride, of being included in the princess's company, was a beacon of hope, a chance to prove himself beyond the confines of his apprenticeship. Pug rode in silence, his horse ambling along the bluffs, overlooking a shimmering sea under the summer sun. The scent of flowers mingled with the ocean breeze, creating a serene backdrop for his thoughts. He trailed behind Princess Carline, his mind replaying the Duke's stern lecture that morning about his responsibilities. Despite being barely judged ready to accompany the princess, Pug's heart flooded with a mix of exhilaration and nerves. However, his initial thrill quickly soured as the princess, imperious and impatient, refused all his attempts at conversation, dismissing him repeatedly as
boy.
Pug's horse lagged behind the princess's fine palfrey, preferring to nibble on grass rather than keep pace. Clad in a bright red tunic given by Kulgan, Pug felt dwarfed by Carline's elegance, her yellow riding dress and matching hat marking her as born to nobility. As hunger gnawed at him, Pug's thoughts turned to the lunch basket hanging from his saddle, attempting escape from his awkward predicament. Breaking the silence, Carline's voice cut through his reverie.
Boy, what is your craft?
She asked, her tone as cold as her gaze. Stammering, Pug replied.
I'm apprentice to Master Kulgan.
Her interest flickered briefly, then vanished.
Oh, you're that boy.
She remarked dismissively. Their ride continued in silence until Carline commanded a halt at a scenic overlook. Pug dismounted, fumbling to assist her, but she was already on the ground, handing him her reins. She moved to the cliff's edge, her back a silhouette against the vast sea.
Do you think I am beautiful?
She asked, suddenly, catching Pug off guard.
Yes, Your Highness.
He replied, his voice barely masking his discomfort. Her inquiry pressed on.
Very beautiful.
Reluctantly, he affirmed her vanity. Carline mused aloud about her future, her beauty a currency for power and marriage, her words tinged with an unspoken vulnerability.
Have you many friends, boy?
She inquired, her voice softer.
Some, Your Highness.
Pug replied, sensing a fragile loneliness beneath her royal facade. Her demeanor shifted, commanding lunch to be prepared, leaving Pug to tend to the horses. As he led the horses to water, Pug's mind wrestled with conflicting emotions. Carline's beauty and his boyhood fantasies clashed with her imperious demeanor. Yet, her brief vulnerability stirred something protective within him. As he idly practiced with his sling, the scream of the princess shattered his thoughts. Racing over the hill, Pug froze at the sight of two trolls pursuing Carline. The creatures, grotesque and menacing, were nearly upon her. Desperation fueled his actions as he sent a well-aimed stone with his sling, toppling one troll. The other tripped, giving Pugs a narrow window to act. He dashed back towards the horses, hoping to outpace the trolls. In the shallow stream he stumbled, the trolls closing in. Bracing for the end, a strange incantation flared in his mind. Words from Kulgan's teachings formed unbidden, and as he spoke them, the trolls convulsed and fell, drowning in the water. Dazed, Pug staggered back to the hillside where Carline had vanished. Driven now by hunger and exhaustion, he seized bread and wine from the overturned basket. As his mind cleared, realization dawned. He had cast magic, raw, unrefined, but undeniably powerful. In search of Carline, Pug found her hidden and terrified. Her relief upon seeing him alive melted into an embrace, her vulnerability unveiled. Awkwardly, Pug comforted her, the princess's earlier petulance forgotten in the wake of shared danger. Her gratitude, genuine and soft, rekindled his awe, yet her command to find the horses reasserted her royal distance. Their return journey on foot began in an uneasy truce, Pug's anger subsiding as Carline's genuine thanks soothed his wounded pride. As they walked, the spectre of their shared ordeal lingered, an unspoken bond forged in the crucible of fear and bravery. The princess, unaccustomed to such exertion, managed to make it with Pug's assistance, her arm draped over his shoulder as they approached the castle gates. The sight of Carline in such a state set off an alarm, drawing the attention of the keep's guards and her formidable governess, Lady Mana, who charged forward like a protective she-bear, enveloping Carline in a formidable embrace. As the court ladies swarmed around the princess with concern, Lady Mana turned her ire on Pug, berating him for allowing Carline to return in such disarray.
How dare you! I'll see you whipped from one end of the keep to the other.
She growled. Pug, overwhelmed and unable to defend himself, found himself seized by a guard, only to be saved by Carline, who boldly intervened.
Leave him alone.
She cried, tears in her eyes.
He saved my life.
Her declaration silenced the crowd and shifted their perception of Pug from a negligent boy to a heroic figure. As the news of their return spread, the Duke and his sons hurried to greet Carline, leaving Pug to navigate through the flurry of curious onlookers. Swordmaster Fannin's commanding voice cut through the commotion, dispersing the crowd and leaving Pug standing before his mentors and the Duke's court. The Duke, with a demeanour of gratitude, inquired about the day's events, and Pug recounted the tale, with Carline enthusiastically filling in details. The Duke was particularly curious about how Pug managed to defeat the trolls. Pug, still puzzled by his own actions, admitted,
I cast a spell upon them, and they were unable to reach the shore.
Kurgan, his mentor, was visibly surprised by this revelation. The Duke, expressing his gratitude, promised Pug a suitable reward for his bravery. Carleen impulsively hugged Pug tightly, much to his embarrassment and Roland's simmering jealousy. Later, in the solitude of his quarters, Pug reflected on the day's events. Kurgan, pacing with excitement, marveled at Pug's ability to cast a spell without a physical focus, an unprecedented feat in magic.
It's as if you have discovered a completely new form of magic,
Kurgan said, wonder in his voice. Pug, exhausted, drifted off to sleep, leaving Kurgan to ponder the implications of this new development. The following day, Pug, adorned in fine clothing, stood before the Duke as he held court. The hall was filled with nobles and townsfolk, eager to witness the boy who had saved the princess. The Duke, in a formal ceremony, bestowed upon Pug the title of Squire and granted him the estate of Forest Deep. The room erupted in cheers, and Pug, overwhelmed by the honour, felt the weight of his new status. After the ceremony, the Duke spoke to Pug privately, emphasising the importance of honour and duty within his family. He entrusted Father Tully with a document meant for Pug's future, hinting at its significance, but leaving its contents a mystery.
I hope you will remember this day and consider long what it says,
the Duke advised. As the Duke welcomed Pug into the court, promising to refine his manners for future visits to the King's City, Pug felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The path ahead was uncertain, but the boy, who had once been a mere apprentice, now stood before the Duke as a Squire of Crydee. Chapter 3, Whispers of War. The cool breeze heralded the end of summer, and the anticipation of autumn rains and winter snows loomed over the land. Pug, once the centre of attention following his astonishing feat with the trolls, found himself settled back into routine. Immersed in ancient texts, he was eager to hone his burgeoning magical skills, though his progress was patchy and unpredictable. Kurgan, his mentor, allowed him the freedom to find his own pace, resulting in many solitary hours of study. His attempt to levitate a candle holder had been unsuccessful, but Pug felt a flicker of potential, enough to invigorate his studies anew. However, the quietude of his scholarly pursuits was abruptly shattered by the clamour from the courtyard below. Leaning out of his window, he spied Tomas below, who shouted up,
"A ship has foundered in the night. The wreck has beached beneath sailors' grief. Come and see."
Pug didn't need further persuasion. Pulling on his cloak, he raced through the castle, narrowly dodging Alfan, the pastry cook, who playfully threatened to box his ears for his reckless haste. Pug's status as a squire had done little to change his standing among the kitchen staff, who still saw him as one of their own. Reaching Thomas, Pug asked,
Has anyone from the court been told?
"I don't know.
Thomas replied, impatience tinging his voice.
Word just came from the fishing village."
Pug hesitated, wary of the consequences if the Duke learned of his inaction. Yet Thomas's suggestion to declare for the Duke upon arrival at the wreck was tempting.
"If we find a rich bauble or two, who's to know?"
Thomas added, with a conspiratorial grin. Pug, however, was resolute.
I would know.
But the thrill of the moment was infectious, and soon both boys were on their way, Pug riding with Thomas, clinging precariously behind him. The surf roared as they reached the site, the wreckage strewn across the beach. Villagers, who had initially rushed to the scene, scattered at the sight of a noble rider, fearing the Duke's reprisal. Dismounting, Pug and Thomas approached the wreck, its bow painted in vibrant colours and adorned with strange symbols, unlike any kingdom vessel.
"This ship didn't just run on the rocks,"
Thomas observed.
"It looks like it was driven by a storm."
Pug nodded.
There certainly isn't much left, is there?
Their curiosity piqued. They ventured closer, noting the bodies of two men in unfamiliar blue armor. Thomas was eager to explore, and they climbed onto a ledge overlooking the deck. The sight was both fascinating and eerie, the vessel's design alien and foreboding. Inside, Pug felt a compulsion, a tug of magic drawing him to a chest. Within, he discovered a scroll bound with a black ribbon, a find that sent a shiver down his spine. As the tide rose, the urgency of their situation became apparent. They scrambled to safety just as the ship splintered against the rocks, a final thunderous groan marking its end. Their return to the castle was met with the Duke's Council in session, the wreckage a matter of grave concern. Pug and Thomas stood by the door, listening intently as the Duke and his advisors examined the artifacts retrieved from the ship. The craftsmanship was beyond anything they had seen, strong and lightweight, unlike any known to the kingdom. Father Tully, an elder priest, was tasked with discovering the origins of the ship, suggesting they consult the elves and dwarves for counsel.
Whoever these strangers are,
Prince Arutha said,
we had best make sure we can find out as much as possible about them.
The council agreed, and as the session adjourned, Pug and Thomas were left to ponder the implications of their discovery. Thomas was visibly relieved to be out of the formal setting, while Pug was troubled by the potential for conflict. In the kitchen, Thomas regaled his father, Magar, with the story, his father's concerns highlighting the practicalities of war and the strain it would place on their lives. Pug, too, was unsettled, the weight of their find pressing heavily on him. Seeking solace, Pug wandered to the princess's garden, where he encountered Princess Carline. Her presence was both alluring and intimidating, her moods as unpredictable as the sea. She inquired about his absence, her interest in him both flattering and perplexing.
I haven't seen you for more than a week. Have you been busy?
Carline asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and something more. Pug, ever wary of her mercurial nature, replied cautiously. Their interaction was fraught with the tension of unspoken emotions, a dance of youthful uncertainty and burgeoning attraction.
I've been busy with my studies,
Pug explained, trying to justify his absence from the social scene.
Oh, Pooh, you spend too much time in that awful tower.
Carline retorted, her tone as playful as it was chiding. The suggestion of a ride together brightened Carline's face momentarily, but it was quickly overshadowed by the disapproval of Lady Mana, her guardian.
She says that when you were a commoner, you would keep your place. Now that you are a courtier, she suspects you of having aspirations.
Carline teased, a slight smile tugging at her lips. The notion of having aspirations, of climbing the social ladder, left Pug flustered and tongue-tied, prompting Carline to storm off with a dismissive,
Boys, you're all idiots.
Left alone, Pug pondered the complexities of the princess, as unpredictable and captivating as a storm in a salt cellar. His musings were abruptly cut short by Thomas, his friend, bursting in.
The Duke wants us. The man from the ship has died,
Thomas announced, urgency in his voice. In the council chamber, a somber mood prevailed. Absent was Kulgan, too engrossed in deciphering a mysterious magic scroll to heed the summons. Father Tully, however, was present, though visibly drained, his pallor a testament to the ordeal he had endured.
The soldier from the beach regained consciousness briefly.
Tully began, his voice weary. He had dared to enter a mind contact with the dying man, Somich, a soldier from a place called the Empire of Suranuani.
I stayed with him through his last feverish dreams, trying to learn as much as I could.
The revelation that this mysterious ship had come from another world, a realm entirely removed from Midkemia, sent shivers down the spines of those gathered. Tully continued, describing a world ruled by warriors, with cities and armies beyond the imagination of the kingdom's people.
How did they get here, Tully?
Duke Boric asked, pacing with concern. Tully shrugged, the enormity of the situation weighing heavily on him.
perhaps Kulgan can offer a theory. But if this was not a chance occurrence, we may be facing grave times.
As speculation turned to the possibility of an impending invasion, the Duke ordered immediate action. Patrols were doubled and messages dispatched to allies. Yet even as they prepared, a sense of foreboding lingered, punctuated by Tully's warning of magic far beyond their understanding. Pug's restless night was interrupted by urgent footsteps. A foreboding sense led him to Kulgan's room, where the magician lay unconscious, a shimmering void hovering above him. Arms reached through, attempting to drag Kulgan into the unknown. With quick thinking, Pug hurled a spear into the void, causing it to vanish, leaving Kulgan safe, but shaken. The next day, as Kulgan recuperated, he recounted the harrowing events. The scroll, it seemed, was more than a message. It was a conduit to another world. The Tyranny possessed magic of unimaginable power, capable of tearing the fabric of reality itself.
This bridge, it suggests a permanent way between the worlds.
Kulgan mused, his voice tinged with unease. The implications were profound and terrifying. An empire with the means to traverse worlds, perhaps with hostile intent. As the Duke absorbed the weight of these revelations, a message arrived from the Elf Queen, Aglarana. Her journey to Crydee, unprecedented and urgent, underscored the seriousness of the threat. Silence fell over the room, each person grappling with the unknown. For Pug, the gravity of their predicament was palpable, a shadow that clung to him in the days that followed. Night descended upon Crydee, yet sleep eluded many, including Pug and Thomas. They sat together in the garden, beneath a sky heavy with portent.
I expect that these Tyranny people are coming,
Thomas said, his voice a mix of fear and resignation.
We don't know that.
Pug replied, though he too felt the chill of inevitability. Their conversation was interrupted by Swordmaster Fannin, who urged them to rest.
A soldier needs to learn the knack of taking sleep whenever he can find it,
he advised, his own thoughts troubled by the night's events. The next morning, Pug found himself again in Kulgan's chamber. The magician, despite his ordeal, was eager to discuss the implications of the rift and the Tyranny magic.
These people have the ability to control magic that we can only hint at in our speculation.
Kulgan explained, the gravity of his words sinking in. Duke Boric, ever the pragmatic leader, focused on the practicalities.
If this is but an accident, there may be little to fear. But if there is design to their coming, we must prepare for the worst.
With each new piece of information, the reality of the Tyranny threat crystallized. The urgency to understand and respond was paramount, as was the need for allies. The rain-soaked kingdom of Crydee was abuzz with a rare and electrifying anticipation. Pug leaned out of the window, captivated by the commotion in the courtyard below. Despite the relentless downpour, preparations for an important visit continued unfazed, driven by the remarkable nature of the visitors. Elves. The elves, mysterious and seldom seen south of the River Crydee, were a subject of endless curiosity among the castle's inhabitants. Their ways were considered mystical and enigmatic, living apart from men. Their presence was both respected and intriguing. A discreet cough redirected Pug's attention to Kulgan, his mentor, who sat with a large tome before him. Kulgan's eyes, glancing up from the book, urged Pug to return to his studies.
There will be ample time for you to gawk at elves, boy, in a few hours. Then there will be little time for studies. You must learn to make the best use of what time you have.
Kulgan advised, his voice a blend of sternness and understanding. Pug, acknowledging the wisdom in Kulgan's words, closed the window shutters and settled back on his pallet. A small dragon-like creature named Phantus curling at his side. The study before him was a complex task, understanding the shared qualities of spells across different magicians to deepen his grasp of magic's elusive nature. Coolgan believed Pug's previous success with spells stemmed from stress rather than skill, hoping scholarly pursuits might help him break through his educational barriers. The room filled with Coolgan's pipe smoke, stinging Pug's eyes.
Coolgan?
Pug began tentatively.
It would be much nicer working with you if we could somehow keep the fire going for warmth, but move the smoke outside.
Coolgan laughed heartily, and with a swift incantation and a flourish of his hands, gathered the smoke into a sphere and tossed it out the window, leaving the room clear and fresh.
Thank you, but I had a more mundane solution in mind.
Pug suggested, proposing the idea of a chimney for the firepot, inspired by the smithy's forge. Coolgan, impressed by the practicality of the young boy's suggestion, promised to consult the smith about the feasibility of such an idea. As Pug resumed his studies, he wrestled with the inconsistencies in magical practices among revered magicians.
How can there be so much disagreement over the nature of this single construction?
He pondered aloud, drawing Coolgan's attention. Coolgan explained with patience.
Despite any vanity we magicians might feel about our craft, there's really very little order or science involved. Magic is a collection of folk arts and skills passed along from master to apprentice since the beginning of time.
He emphasized the trial and error nature of magic, likening it to carpentry, where different methods yield the same result, a table, but by varying means. Pug's thirst for understanding was evident as he tried to reconcile the disparate practices.
I understand that each of them wanted to achieve his end and found a different means, but there is something missing in the manner they did it.
What is missing, Pug?
Coolgan inquired, intrigued by the boy's insight.
It's as if I expect to find something that will tell me, this is the way it must be done, the only way, or something like that. Does that make any sense?
Pug replied, capturing the essence of his internal conflict. Coolgan nodded, recognizing Pug's struggle.
You see things as a system, rather than as a haphazard collection of events. Perhaps that is part of your trouble.
He encouraged Pug not to dwell on it, affirming his belief in the boy's potential for greatness. Their conversation was interrupted by shouts from the courtyard, signaling the elves' arrival. Excitement surged through Pug, and he raced out, eager to witness the spectacle. He joined his friend Thomas atop a hay wagon, both boys craning to see over the crowd. The elves arrived in a breathtaking display, mounted on ethereal white horses that seemed untouched by rain, their coats glowing faintly. The leader was a striking figure, dismounting with grace and revealing herself as Queen Aglarana. Her presence was mesmerizing, and the boys watched, entranced, as she greeted Duke Borich.
She's beautiful,
Thomas murmured, captivated by the Queen's ethereal appearance. Inside the castle, the elves' visit took on a more serious tone. In the Duke's council chamber, the Queen and her advisors, including her son Prince Callan and the elder Tathar, examined artifacts from a mysterious shipwreck, seeking answers about the strangers from another world. Pug and Thomas recounted their discovery of the ship, providing crucial details that pieced together a broader understanding of the threat posed by the Surani, an enigmatic empire from another world. Callan shared disturbing insights from elven scouts who had uncovered evidence of Surani mapping and reconnaissance efforts in the region. The elves had witnessed bands of these outworlders, short and stocky men, clad in brightly coloured armour, moving cautiously through the forests, their presence a harbinger of potential invasion. The Duke, visibly concerned but resolute, acknowledged the gravity of the situation.
We will act. I will send messages to Duke Brusal of Yarbon, and again to Stone Mountain and the Grey Towers,
he declared, signaling a call to arms and alliances. Aglarana pledged the elves' support, recognizing the Surani threat as a danger to all free peoples of the West.
While the elves have little love for the kingdom as such, we respect those of the Crydee. For you have ever been honorable men, and have never sought to extend your realm into our lands. We would ally with you should these outworlders come for conquest,
she affirmed.
It would be good to hear what the dwarven folk know.
She suggested, her words underscored by the weight of coming decisions. Boric, a man of action and strategy, nodded.
I had hoped for word by now, but our messengers have not returned, nor have the pigeons they carry.
An air of impatience hung over his words, a testament to the urgency of their plight. Liam, Boric's eldest son, interjected thoughtfully.
Hawks, perhaps. The pigeons are not always reliable. Or perhaps the messengers never reached the dwarves.
His suggestion hung in the air, a possibility that only deepened the tension. The conversation shifted to the dwarven clans, with Boric querying the elf prince, Callan, about their current leaders. Callan responded with a calm certainty.
As then, Stone Mountain is under the banner of Hawthorne, of Hogar's line, at village Del Moria. The Grey Towers rally to the banner of Dolgan, of Tholin's line, at village Caldara.
Boric's eyes gleamed with a spark of hope.
They will prove fierce allies if trouble comes,
he declared, recalling the valor of the dwarves from the siege of Kars years past. Amidst the serious deliberations, the conversation turned to the free cities and the prince in Krondor. Boric, ever the tactician, pondered aloud.
I must think on that, for there are problems in the east, or so I have word.
The council meeting concluded, and as the attendees dispersed, the youthful apprentices, Thomas and Pug, were left to their own devices. Fannin, the old swordmaster, ushered Thomas away for training, while Pug remained with the magician Kulgan, who had other plans for him.
Pug, Prince Callan expressed an interest in your small library of magic books. Would you please show them to him?
Pug eagerly obliged, leading the elf prince up the stairs to his modest quarters. The room was humble, yet it held a curious charm, not least because of its unusual resident, Fantus, a small drake who regarded Callan with wary eyes. Callan, however, spoke to the creature in a language Pug did not understand, soothing Fantus with a gentle touch. The elf settled onto the floor, eschewing the furniture ill-suited to his kind.
You have a most unusual pet, Squire Pug,
he remarked, a small smile playing on his lips. The elf's presence was calming, and Pug soon found himself relaxed, speaking freely about Fantus and the comings and goings of the castle. As they conversed, Callan's interest shifted to Pug's books, particularly Dorcas's treatise on the animation of objects.
Did you find this interesting?
Callan inquired, glancing at the tome with a discerning eye. Pug admitted his struggles with the material, to which Callan replied with a grin.
Dorcas was an unclear man, or at least I found him so.
The elf prince's candidness was refreshing, and Pug found himself deeply engaged in their discussion. Their talk meandered from magic to the mysterious happenings at court, where Callan hinted at Meacham's possible mission.
The Duke will reveal his own plans, I think,
he said, his tone enigmatic. As the evening wore on, Pug found himself confiding in Callan about his tangled feelings toward Princess Carline. Callan listened with the patient ear of someone who understood the complexities of youth.
Who can understand another's mind?
He mused, offering insights that Pug found both comforting and perplexing. When Pug expressed frustration over Roland, a fellow squire and potential rival for Carline's affections, Callan offered wisdom.
Roland makes you feel clumsy only because you let him,
he advised, his words a gentle nudge towards self-awareness. Their conversation touched upon elven magic, a subject that fascinated Pug. Callan explained,
Our magic is ancient. It is part of what we are and in what we create, like air, always surrounding us, yet unseen.
Pug was captivated, his mind a whirl of new ideas and possibilities. Yet, as the night grew late, Callan took his leave, reminding Pug that rest was also a part of the learning process. The next morning, the castle was abuzz with activity. Servants whispered of Tsurani invaders. and the Duke's plans were a topic of speculation. Pug and Thomas, now brimming with anticipation, joined the courtyard throng as the elves, led by Queen Aglarana, departed in a spectacular display of elegance and grace. Thomas watched the elves leave, his heart full of longing.
I wish I could see Elvendar someday,
he said softly. Pug, ever the realist, replied,
Maybe you will, but I doubt it. For I will be a magician, and you will be a soldier, and the Queen will reign in Elvendar long after we are dead.
Their playful banter was interrupted by Gardel the smith, who had crafted a hood for Pug's firepot. The invention was a point of pride for Pug, and they hurried to install it, eager to see the fruits of their labour. Meanwhile, Kurgan revealed the Duke's decision to journey to the Free Cities and Krondor, a mission of great importance. Pug, filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension, pleaded to join the expedition. Kurgan, with a twinkle in his eye, granted the request, much to the boy's delight. Chapter 4, Forged in Friendship. Princess Carlene's garden, usually a sanctuary of peace and beauty, was about to witness a storm of a different kind. Pug, the young magician's apprentice, was hurrying there, filled with a mix of anxiety and resolve. Princess Carline had sent him a note, a gesture that held the promise of reconciliation after their last tempestuous encounter. But when Pug arrived, he found not Carline, but Squire Roland, waiting for him, his stance as tense as a drawn bowstring.
Good day, Pug.
Roland greeted, a smile not reaching his eyes.
Good day, Roland,
Pug replied, his gaze darting around for any sign of Carline. Roland's voice carried a forced levity, barely concealing the simmering hostility beneath.
Expecting someone?
Well, actually, I was expecting to see the princess,
Pug admitted, a hint of defiance creeping into his tone. Roland's feigned surprise did little to mask his irritation.
Really? Lady Glynis mentioned something about a note, but I had come to understand things were strained between the two of you.
Pug bristled at Roland's overbearing attitude. His patience, already worn thin by Roland's constant antagonism, snapped.
As one squire to another, Roland, let me put it this way. How things stand between Carline and myself is none of your business.
Roland's face darkened with anger.
Be damned, it's none of my business. I don't know what you're playing at, Pug, but if you do anything to hurt her, I'll...
Me hurt her?
Pug retorted, shocked and infuriated.
She's the one playing us one against the other.
Before Pug could finish, he found himself on the ground, his vision exploding with stars and his ears ringing. Roland had struck him and now stood over him, fists clenched, eyes blazing.
If you ever say ill of her again, I'll beat you senseless.
Pug's anger surged. He scrambled to his feet, facing Roland with defiance.
You've had 2 years and more to win her, Roland. Leave it alone.
Roland charged, and they went down in a tangle of limbs, neither able to gain the upper hand. But as the struggle continued, something inside Pug shifted. A familiar force, terrifying in its intensity, began to rise within him, as it had once before in the face of danger. Letters of light and flame danced in his mind's eye, and his consciousness slipped into a primal state. Suddenly, Roland was gasping for air, clawing at his own throat, his eyes wide with panic. It was an illusion, a manifestation of Pug's untamed magic. Realizing what had happened, Pug fought to regain control. He grabbed Roland's wrists, shouting,
It's an illusion. You were choking yourself.
Understanding dawned in Roland's eyes, and he sagged back, the fight draining out of him.
Why?
He gasped, tears of frustration and fear mingling on his cheeks.
Because you're held under a spell more compelling than any I could fashion.
Pug responded softly.
You truly love her, don't you?
Roland's anger gave way to vulnerability, and he nodded, his voice breaking.
And you?
Pug hesitated, unsure of his own feelings.
I'm not sure. She makes me doubt myself. Sometimes I think of no one else, and other times I wish I were as far from her as I could be.
Roland seemed to understand, his own turmoil reflected in Pug's words. They sat in silence, the tension between them dissipating. Their moment of peace was shattered by Carlene's sudden arrival. Her eyes widened at the sight of the two boys, bruised and dirtied from their scuffle.
Since you two seem so taken with each other, I'll not intrude,
she declared, her voice sharp with disdain. But instead of fueling their rivalry, her words sparked a shared laughter between Pug and Roland, a release of the pent-up emotions that had threatened to tear them apart. Carlene stormed off, leaving them in a fit of giggles. Roland offered Pug a hand, pulling him to his feet.
Sorry, Pug. I had no right to be angry with you. I can't sleep nights thinking of her. But since you saved her, all I ever hear is your name.
I'm not very good at controlling magic yet,
Pug admitted.
When I lose my temper, it seems all sorts of terrible things can happen.
Roland nodded, the last of his animosity fading.
She's only setting us one against the other. I am the fool. It's you she cares for.
Believe me, Roland, I'm not so sure I'm to be envied.
Pug sighed. Roland grinned wryly.
She is a strong-willed girl, that's clear. But there are as many changes in a young girl's heart as in the fickle winds, as the old saying goes. I'll not blame you for Carlene's actions. Still, you won't mind if I keep an eye out for a change in the weather?
Pug laughed, feeling lighter.
What's to be done, Roland?
Roland shrugged with mock bravado.
Don't look to me for advice, Pug. I dance to her tune more than any, but worrying about the future is dry work. I think it would be benefited by a mug of strong ale.
They turned to leave the garden, leaving behind the echoes of their laughter. As they walked, they stumbled upon Thomas, laden with armor and weapons, marching under the watchful eye of Sergeant Gardan. The sight was a comic relief, a reminder of their shared camaraderie amidst the chaos of youth and love. Later, as they sat in the ale shed, sharing stories and laughter, the tensions of the day melted away. Thomas, with a mischievous grin, teased Pug about his courtly entanglements, only for Pug to retaliate with a sly remark about Thomas's own secretive liaisons. Roland couldn't help but laugh at their antics, turning their gathering into a joyful celebration of friendship. As they raised their cups in a solemn toast, Roland declared,
"To friendship,"
sealing a bond that would transcend time and distance. As the evening gave way to night, Pug staggered back to his room, the effects of their ale-fueled revelry still clouding his senses. The quiet was shattered by an unexpected knock that roused him from his stupor. Struggling to his feet, he opened the door to find Carlene, the Duke's strong-willed daughter, standing there, her cloak wrapped tightly around her.
Close the door,
She urged, her presence as surprising as it was alarming. Pug, still groggy, complied, his mind racing with implications. Carlene's unexpected visit was both a thrill and a terror, her presence in his chambers a scandal waiting to happen. Her fearless demeanor belied the danger they both faced should her father discover them. As she settled onto his pallet, her intentions became clear, yet Pug, clad only in trousers, was acutely aware of the impropriety. Carlene's boldness was both disarming and enchanting.
You boys get to do all the interesting things.
She lamented, voicing her frustration with the restrictions of her noble status. Pugs, caught between fear and fascination, implored her to leave, knowing the consequences of their clandestine meeting. But Carlene, undeterred, had something to say, and she would not be turned away. Their conversation veered to the heart of Carlene's visit, a confession of affection that left Pug bewildered. Her kiss was a revelation, a moment of vulnerability wrapped in defiance. Yet Pug, ever the cautious apprentice, knew the peril of indulging in such passions.
Carline, you can't stay here.
He insisted, mindful of the Duke's wrath. As they spoke, Pug's internal struggle was evident. Torn between his duty and his feelings, he confessed his confusion, his desire to understand himself before committing to anything more. Carline, her initial anger giving way to understanding, listened as Pug laid bare his fears and aspirations.
If I chose now, Carline, I might always doubt the choice,
he explained, his words tinged with sincerity. Carline's response was unexpectedly tender, her acknowledgement of his dilemma a testament to her maturity.
I'll do whatever you say, Pug,
she promised, a vow that hung heavily between them. Pug, emboldened by her understanding, dared to hope that their futures, whatever they held, would not be marred by regret. As the night wore on, Carline departed, leaving Pug alone with his thoughts. The scent of her lingered in the air, a reminder of the line he had dared to walk. He lay awake, contemplating the night's events, aware that the morning would bring new challenges. His rest was short-lived. A pre-dawn summons from Kulgan, his mentor, shattered the quiet. Pug grappled with the remnants of his hangover as he dressed, steeling himself for whatever awaited him. In Kulgan's quarters, he found the magician in animated discussion with Father Tully, the priest's practical wisdom clashing with Kulgan's scholarly inclinations. The urgency of their conversation came into focus, an impending journey driven by the Duke's concerns about the approaching winter.
We're leaving,
Pug asked, the reality of the situation dawning on him. Kulgan's confirmation was brusque, the urgency of their departure overriding any further explanation. Yet Kulgan paused, a fatherly caution in his eyes as he offered Pug advice.
I heard every word,
he admitted, referring to the previous night's encounter. Pug's blush spoke volumes, but Kulgan's words were not of reproach, but of guidance.
One who cares for her would take that into consideration,
he advised, a reminder of the stakes involved. Pug nodded, his resolve fortified by Kulgan's wisdom. With a final admonition to prepare for their journey, Kulgan resumed his packing, the weight of unspoken knowledge shared between them. As Pug hurried to his own quarters, the looming adventure ahead promised to test his mettle in ways he could scarcely imagine. In the quiet of the castle, as dawn broke over the horizon, Pug gathered his belongings, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts, of friendship, of duty, and of a girl who had dared to risk everything for a chance at love. A light wet snow was falling as Pug, shivering under his great cloak, sat astride his horse in the courtyard of the Duke's Keep. The dawn was breaking, casting a dim light over the bustling scene of men loading supplies onto the mules of the baggage train. It was the day of departure for the Duke's company, and Pug, feeling the chill of anticipation and the winter air, watched the commotion around him. A sudden commotion drew his attention to Thomas, who was struggling with a spirited horse. Pug shouted instructions.
Don't pull so hard. Pull back gently and release a couple of times.
Thomas, concentrating intensely, managed to calm the horse, and it moved alongside Pug's own. Pug, with a mix of amusement and sympathy, offered,
By the time we reach Borden, you'll be riding like the king's lancers.
Thomas, shifting uncomfortably in the saddle, groaned,
and walking like a ruptured spinster.
Pug dismounted to check Thomas's saddle, discovering that Rolf, a rival in the stables, had knotted Thomas's stirrup leathers. Pug fixed them and gave Thomas a crash course in riding, ensuring the saddle was properly adjusted. Thomas, still fuming at Rolf's mischief, declared,
I'll thrash him within an inch of death.
Pug, however, persuaded him to let it go for now, with more pressing matters at hand. Their conversation was interrupted by Martin, the Duke's huntmaster.
Are you traveling with us?
Thomas inquired, hopeful for familiar company. Martin, cloaked warmly in green, replied,
For a short while, I'm to lead some trackers around Crydee's boundaries.
His expression darkened at the mention of the Cyrene.
If elves are given to worry, there's something to worry over.
As preparations continued, Pug glanced towards the keep, lost in thought. Thomas noticed his distraction.
Why so glum? Aren't you excited about going?
Pug shrugged off the question, though his mind lingered on memories of the previous night. Thomas, attempting to lighten the mood, jested about his own troubles.
I think Neela has tumbled to that little matter we spoke of yesterday.
Pug chuckled.
That will teach you to be mindful of who you escort into pantries.
Their banter was interrupted by the arrival of the Duke and his entourage, including Carline, the Duke's daughter, who made a beeline for Pug. She embraced him tightly, whispering,
"Take care and stay well, and come home."
Her parting kiss left Thomas teasing Pug about the princess's affections. The company soon set off, with the Duke and his son, Arutha, at the lead. The journey took them through the dense woodlands, and over the days, the snow draped the land in a white shroud. The air was filled with the crunch of hooves on icy ground, the rhythm of the march only interrupted by the occasional sight of fire drakes in the distance, their mating dance a spectacle of colour and flame. 3 days into the journey, the party reached the southern branch of the River Crydee, marking the border between Crydee and the barony of Cass. Martin and his trackers turned eastward, leaving the company to continue towards their destination. The forest grew denser and the mood more tense as they ventured deeper into the Green Heart, with the eerie silence of the woods unsettling the men. The Duke's urgency to reach the South Pass before it became impassable was palpable, and they pushed on, meeting a detachment of guards from Cass with fresh horses, saving time on their march. Despite the pressing pace, Garden, the sergeant of the Duke's Guard, warned,
"Be wary. From here to the Grey Towers is the darkest part of the Green Heart."
As they pressed on, the forest seemed to close in around them, its oppressive atmosphere weighing heavily on the company. Pug, riding alongside Thomas, tried to shake off the feeling of impending doom. Thomas, ever the optimist, remarked on the chance for a good fight, though his words did little to dispel the unease. Suddenly, the tranquility of the forest shattered as a shout erupted from the front of the column. Chaos ensued as the company charged forward, dodging branches and obstacles in a mad dash. Pug, caught up in the rush, found himself in the midst of a battle. Dark figures, resembling elves, but with a sinister edge, attacked from the shadows, their arrows finding deadly marks among the men of Crydee. Pug and Thomas, having lost sight of each other in the fray, fought to regroup with the Duke's men. Lord Boric's command cut through the din.
"To me, we are surrounded."
The retreat was a harrowing ordeal, with the attackers in relentless pursuit. Pug struggled to keep up, narrowly avoiding arrows and branches. At last, they reached a small rise, where the Duke called for a halt. The weary survivors gathered, their numbers diminished and spirits worn. Garden reported the grim tally.
"We've lost 18 men, have 6 wounded, and all the mules and baggage were taken."
The Duke, his expression grim, ordered them to rest briefly before continuing, aware that their pursuers were not far behind. As they rode on, the forest seemed to conspire against them, twisting their path and obscuring their direction. Kulgan, the magician, repeatedly cast spells to determine their course, but the dark magic was adept at herding them back towards the main force. In a desperate gamble, Boric ordered a sudden turn eastward, hoping to break free from the encircling threat. The company charged once more, their mounts driven to the edge of endurance. Pug, struggling to control his horse while managing his weapons, narrowly avoided disaster as arrows rained down from the trees. The survivors crashed through the underbrush in a bid to escape. A soldier, thrown from his dying horse, faced his fate with stoic bravery, choosing to fight rather than flee. His courageous stand left Pug's eyes brimming with tears, a stark reminder of the peril they all faced.
"Move, Squire!"
a rider shouted, breaking Pug's reverie. Spurred into action, he urged his horse into a staggering trot, joining the ragged column fleeing through the dense forest. They pressed onward until, at last, Lord Boric called for a halt in a clearing. Hope flickered as they realized they had momentarily lost their pursuers.
Have we lost them?
Arutha asked, a mixture of disbelief and hope in his voice. The Duke nodded, confirming they had slipped behind the enemy lines. Yet time was not on their side.
We have 15 minutes at best.
Boric warned, his voice edged with frustration.
If only we could find a place to hide.
Kulgan, the wise magician, offered a risky solution.
I have an amulet which can control weather,
he proposed. Despite the danger, Boric approved the plan, ordering the company to silence their horses and gather near a rocky outcropping. Chanting softly, Kulgan invoked the amulet's power, weaving a dense fog around them, obscuring their presence. The fog spread, enveloping the clearing and extending into the surrounding forest.
All must remain quiet,
Kulgan whispered, hoping the terrain would guide the enemies past them. Each man held his breath, understanding the precariousness of their situation. Pug, standing shoulder to shoulder with Thomas, felt the weight of their predicament. The air was thick with tension, punctuated only by the distant shouts of the Dark Brotherhood. Garden, the formidable sergeant, stood vigil, ready to act should the enemy breach their foggy sanctuary. A soft footfall resonated nearby, freezing everyone in place. The Brotherhood's voices, speaking in their strange tongue, seemed to draw closer, yet the fog shielded them. Gardan, moving with predatory grace, dispatched a lone Dark Brother silently, preserving their fragile advantage. Time stretched interminably, but slowly the enemy's voices faded into the distance.
They are past us. Lead the horses. We go east,
Boric whispered, relief palpable in his voice. The weariness of the journey weighed heavily on the company. With only a fraction of their original number remaining, they pressed onward into the foothills. As the sun set, Boric ordered a cautious halt.
The falling snow should cover our tracks by morning,
Arutha noted, ever practical. Pug and Thomas, exhausted beyond measure, huddled for warmth, the bitter cold seeping into their bones.
I think I'll never move again,
Thomas panted, echoing Pug's own thoughts. The night passed fitfully, and with the dawn, they resumed their arduous march. 3 more horses perished, their frozen carcasses stark reminders of the harsh reality they faced. Yet, a glimmer of hope appeared when Pug and Thomas, climbing a ridge, glimpsed the majestic peaks of the Grey Towers.
Glory,
Thomas exclaimed, eyes wide with awe. The sight ignited a spark of determination within them, renewing their resolve to reach the safety of the dwarf-held mountains. Garden, ever vigilant, organized the group, ensuring they left no trace of their passage. Boric, contemplating their precarious situation, decided to head north, trusting in his instincts and the dwarves' hospitality. As the weather turned, a storm approached, its icy claws threatening to undo them. Kulgan, sensing its arrival, urged immediate action. The Duke, acknowledging the urgency, dispatched scouts to find shelter. A cave was located just in time, offering a temporary reprieve from the elements. Inside, the company huddled around a fire, roasting what remained of their provisions. Pug, shaking off the weight of fatigue, joined Thomas in devouring the meager meal. Kulgan, ever the caretaker, checked on the boys' condition, ensuring they were spared the creeping threat of frostbite. The cave provided a brief sanctuary, but danger was never far. As they rested, an ambush erupted. Goblins, driven by madness and hunger, stormed the cave, their desperation evident in their frenzied attack. The soldiers of Crydee, though weary, fought with the ferocity of cornered animals, quickly dispatching the intruders. The battle was brief but brutal. Pug, sword in hand, marveled at the resilience of his comrades. As the last goblin fell, silence descended upon the cave once more. Kulgan, inspecting the fallen, noted the goblin's recent wounds, a mystery that puzzled them all.
Who have they been fighting?
Pug wondered aloud. echoing Boric's own thoughts. The answer remained elusive, adding another layer of uncertainty to their already precarious situation. Relief came in an unexpected form. A group of dwarves, led by the charismatic Dolgan, arrived, their appearance a welcome surprise.
What in the name of the gods brings such a sorry-looking party of tall folk to this cold and forlorn place?
Dolgan quipped, his eyes twinkling with humor. The tension eased as the dwarves shared their fires and provisions, extending the hospitality of the Grey Towers. Dolgan, recognizing the Duke's tabard, offered guidance and assistance.
From your tabard, I see you to be men of Crydee,
he acknowledged, extending a hand of friendship. Pug, sensing the shift in fortunes, felt a flicker of hope. With the dwarves' help, the path to safety seemed possible once more. As the company settled into the cave, the warmth of camaraderie and the promise of aid buoyed their spirits, driving away the shadows of despair. Chapter 5, Echoes in the Deep. Under the shadowed canopy of the Grey Towers, a band of dwarves, led by the stout-hearted Dolgan, kept a vigilant watch. Among them, the humans from Crydee, weary from their journey, gathered around a comforting campfire. The smell of hearty stew mingled with the crisp mountain air as Pug and Thomas devoured trail bread and smoked fish. Pug's eyes wandered, watching the dwarves work with a disciplined efficiency, seemingly impervious to the cold that nipped at the humans. Dolgan, the dwarven chief, was in deep conversation with Lord Boric, the Duke of Crydee. The dwarven leader reminisced.
I remember you, Lord Boric, though you were scarcely more than a baby when I was last at Crydee. Your father set a fine table.
The Duke, with a nod of respect, replied,
And should you come again to Crydee, Dolgan, I hope you'll find my table equally satisfactory.
As the conversation turned to more pressing matters, Dolgan's face grew thoughtful.
Now to the matter of the news you carry. They are strange tidings.
He explained the unsettling changes in the regions around their mines. Goblins and Moradel, also known as the Dark Brothers, were abandoning their villages, causing unrest among the dwarves. Boric listened intently as Dolgan continued.
Most likely your messengers didn't reach our villages because of the large number of Moradel and goblins fleeing the mountains into the forests.
The Duke's expression turned grave as he realized the implications.
The Surani,
he muttered, understanding that the aliens' invasion was forcing the local tribes to relocate. Arutha, Boric's son, astutely observed.
Then they're up there in strength.
Dolgan, with a nod of approval, acknowledged the young prince's insight.
That's a bright lad you've got, Lord Boric. Aye, Prince. They're up there and in strength.
The dwarves, renowned warriors of the West, lacked the numbers to combat such a host. Dolgan warned.
To dislodge such a host as have been passing would require a great force of men, well armed and provisioned.
Colgan the magician mused aloud.
I would give anything to know how they reached these mountains.
The Duke, however, was more concerned with the size of the enemy force. Dolgan guessed.
Close to 10,000 I'd recon.
The weight of the number was not lost on Boric, whose forces were insufficient to stand against such a horde. A plan was needed, and quickly. Dolgan suggested a perilous alternative route through the ancient dwarven mines, the Mac Mordain cattle, to reach Crondor and muster the armies of the West.
There is one mine that passes completely under the mountains,
Dolgan explained.
It will take 2 days to pass through, and there may be dangers.
With no other options, Boric agreed. Dolgan, in good spirit, requested a small price for his guidance.
Say, a pouch of tobacco and a fine dinner at Crydee.
The Duke, relieved, consented. And so, as dawn broke, Dolgan led the party through the rocky foothills into the heart of the Grey Towers. The journey was arduous, with Dolgan marching tirelessly at the head, guiding them into the depths of the mountain. The tunnels were damp, with shadows that seemed to move just beyond the reach of their torches. Pug felt the oppressive weight of the rock above, while Thomas muttered,
"I'd not want to stray down here. I've lost all sense of direction."
The party halted in a vast cavern where Dolgan shared tales of the glory holes, ancient mining sites carved by his ancestors. Despite the marvels, the mine's eerie atmosphere unsettled the travellers. As they ventured deeper, Dolgan promised a sight few had seen, a waterfall that shimmered with glowing colours, a remnant of the ancient river Winula. The cavern was vast, filled with the roaring sound of the falls. The water's luminescence painted a fairy tale picture in the darkness, a momentary respite from the oppressive path. But the Duke, weary of the mine's hidden dangers, urged them onward.
"I hope we have enough brands to last the journey,"
he remarked, mindful of the dwindling torches. As they continued, Boric confided in Kulgan and Arutha, admitting,
"I have had an ill feeling for the last few hours."
Kulgan nodded, acknowledging the same unease, while Arutha, drawing in the dirt, echoed their dread. Pug and Thomas shared their own apprehensions. In the eerie glow of torchlight, Thomas flashed a sinister grin, his voice dripping with mockery.
"Afraid of the dark, little boy?"
Pug, unfazed, retorted with a snort.
"No more than you, should you but admit it."
The group led the mules deeper into the mines, their hooves echoing down the labyrinthine stone tunnels. After a day's journey and a brief rest at noon, they approached the cavern where Dolgan announced they would spend the night. A chill crept over Pug, a cold sensation that had haunted him for the past hour. Each time he turned to look behind him, Gardan, sensing the same unease, remarked,
"I feel it too, boy, as if something is near."
In a vast chamber, Dolgan halted, his hand raised to silence all. Everyone strained to hear, but the silence was absolute.
"We will camp here,"
the dwarf finally declared. Around the fire, the mood was subdued. Dolgan explained,
"This part of Macmordain Cadal is closest to the deeper ancient tunnels. Once we pass the next cavern, we'll have a speedy passage to the surface."
Lord Boric, looking around, admitted,
"This place may suit your nature, dwarf, but I will be glad to have it behind."
Dolgan's laughter echoed warmly.
"It is not that the place suits my nature, Lord Boric, but rather that my nature suits the place. My folk have ever been miners, but I'd rather spend my time in the high pastures of Caldera, or in the long hall with my brethren, drinking ale and singing ballads."
"Do you spend much time singing ballads?"
Pug inquired. Dolgan smiled, his eyes gleaming.
"Aye. Winters are long and hard in the mountains. It's a good life."
As they settled for the night, Pug was again touched by a faint, creeping chill as he lay back, slipping into dreamless sleep. Morning brought cold and stiffness. As the guards prepared the mules, Pug shook Thomas awake. Thomas grumbled,
"I was dreaming of a feast at home."
Pug tossed him a biscuit.
"This will have to do until Borden."
They set off, and the icy feeling returned intermittently as they approached the last great cave. Dolgan paused, listening.
"Stop! For a moment I thought—"
A sudden, more intense wave of terror washed over Pug.
"Dolgan, Lord Boric,"
he cried.
"Something terrible is happening."
A chilling moan echoed, and Kulgan confirmed.
"I feel something also."
"A wraith!"
Dolgan shouted.
"Form a circle!"
Weapons were drawn, and the guards circled the terrified mules. Garden shielded Pug and Thomas, who clutched their swords with trembling hands. The wraith, a dark, shifting form with glowing red eyes, emerged from the shadows. Dolgan warned,
"Keep close and guard your neighbor. Don't let it touch you."
The wraith advanced slowly, inspecting its prey. A guard's sword struck it, causing a shrill moan and a flash of blue fire. The wraith retaliated, and the guard fell. Chaos erupted as the mules broke free. In the melee, Pug spotted Kulgan, creating a protective smoke.
We must leave the mules,
the magician instructed.
The undead will not enter the smoke.
Dolgan pointed to a tunnel they needed to take. The party moved quickly, but Pug, in disbelief, saw Thomas on the other side of the wraith.
Thomas,
he cried. Garden held Pug back.
We must leave him, Pug. Thomas is a soldier.
As they retreated, the wraith turned toward Thomas, who hesitated before fleeing down another tunnel. The creature shrieked and pursued him as Thomas's torchlight vanished into the darkness. Separated from the others, Thomas ran, torch and sword in hand, fear and determination fueling him. The wraith, relentless yet not gaining ground, pursued. Thomas's mind was a whirl of strategy and survival, the primal cunning of prey. He darted through side corridors, trying to lose the creature. Re-entering the hall of bodies, he grabbed a fresh torch and chose a tunnel, hoping it led to the surface. The wraith howled, and Thomas's long strides carried him with newfound hope. But the tunnel split into a maze, and his hope waned. He took random turns, the wraith's shrieks fading. Exhausted, he sank to the floor, realizing the creature was lost. In a cavern, Thomas found a lake. Drinking deeply, he fashioned torches from driftwood and weeds. As the firelight grew stronger, the cavern revealed its hidden majesty. The walls shimmered with veins of crystal and metallic ore, golds, silvers, and deep blues refracting light in a dazzling cascade. It was as if the stone itself had been dusted with stars. Stalactites hung from the vaulted ceiling like ancient chandeliers, some dripping slow tears into the lake below. With renewed resolve, Thomas pressed on. He encountered bones and faint tracks, signs of life in the desolate place. He traversed deeper, driven by memories and dreams of becoming a hero and seeing the beautiful elven woman once more. The group that emerged from the mine was a picture of weariness and sorrow. Pug collapsed on the wet ground, staring into the gloomy sky, his heart heavy with the loss of Thomas, his friend and brother, in all but blood. When he awoke to a crackling fire and the scent of roasting rabbits, Dolgan had already snared their meal and left others to watch over the sleeping Kulgan. Arutha, the Duke's youngest son, noticed Pug's awakening and approached him. He sat beside Pug, heedless of the cold snow.
How do you feel, Pug?
He asked, his voice full of concern. Pug, overwhelmed by the memory of Thomas, could barely speak. Tears flowed freely as Arutha comforted him.
There is nothing shameful in mourning the loss of a friend, Pug.
Arutha assured him.
My father and I share your pain.
Dolgan joined them, expressing his own sorrow over Thomas.
We all share your loss,
he said, solemnly. Kulgan, now awake, sat with them, offering silent support. As they gathered by the fire, Boric engaged in a tense exchange with Dolgan. The dwarf, resolute in his mission, announced his intention to return to the mines, hoping against hope to find Thomas. Boric protested.
To go would be the sheerest folly.
Dolgan, undeterred, argued.
If Thomas eluded the wraith, he'll be wandering lost. I must find him. If he lives, I'll bring him home.
Pug, stirred by Dolgan's determination, asked.
Do you think you can find him, Dolgan?
If any can, I can.
Dolgan reassured him, though he cautioned against raising false hopes. Nevertheless, Pug clung to the glimmer of hope Dolgan's words offered. With dawn, Dolgan prepared to leave, instructing the group on how to reach safety. Borish and Kulgan expressed their gratitude to the dwarf, acknowledging the debt they owed him. Dolgan, taking a pouch of tabak from Kulgan, smiled.
Thank you, magician. I am in your debt.
Boric placed a hand on Dolgan's shoulder.
It is we who are in your debt, Dolgan. May good fortune go with you.
The dwarf nodded, and without further ado, disappeared into the darkness of Mordain Cadel, determined to find Thomas. Dolgan traversed the tunnels with practiced ease, his instincts guiding him through the dark labyrinth. His senses, honed over years, detected faint signs of Thomas's passage. Yet, as he retraced their steps, the trail was often lost amidst the chaos left by the wraith. Eventually, Dolgan stumbled upon a cavern that took his breath away. There, amidst a pile of gold and jewels, sat Thomas, sharing a meal with an enormous golden dragon. Dolgan's instinct screamed for flight, but his resolve held firm as the boy leaped up and greeted him with joy. The dragon, Roch, spoke in a voice that echoed through the hall.
Welcome, dwarf. Thy friend hath told me that thou wouldst not forsake him.
Dolgan was bewildered, but relieved. Thomas, full of questions and excitement, stood beside him as Roy explained their presence.
Come into my home, dwarf, and I will tell thee,
the dragon invited. The dragon's tale was one of ancient power and solitude. Roch, the last of the golden dragons in the mountains, had chosen a life of peace, turning away treasure hunters with magic rather than violence. His kindness to Thomas was a testament to his resolve to harm no innocent. Dolgan listened as the dragon recounted the history of his kind, their dominion once unchallenged. But time and conflict had reduced their numbers, leaving Roch alone in his twilight years. Dolgan thanked Roch for his kindness. The dragon, acknowledging the gratitude, revealed a solemn truth.
It is given to dragons to know the hour of their death, and mine is close. I am content for it to be so.
Thomas, shocked by the revelation, looked to Dolgan for understanding. The dwarf, though troubled, realized the honor bestowed upon them to be witnesses to the passing of such an ancient being. Roar, with a voice thickened by time and the approaching grip of death, told stories of his life in Midkemia's skies, of distant lands where tigers reigned in urban jungles and mountains echoed with the language of eagles. His tales wove a tapestry of wonder, a lifetime of adventures, now ending beneath the mountain's stone embrace. As the dragon's strength waned, he recounted a tale of a mighty magician named Macros.
He came to me,
Roar rasped.
A man of great power. For 3 days we fought, his magic against mine, and when he bested me, he sought not my riches, but my wisdom. Together we learned and taught, and he healed wounds not visible to the eye.
Thomas listened in awe, picturing the clash of titanic forces. The dragon's tale revealed a bond, formed not through conquest, but understanding, a rare friendship between man and beast.
A boon I ask,
Rot whispered, directing Dolgan to a chest where a black rod lay, a final gift from Macros.
Touch me with it when I am gone,
he instructed. Thomas and Dolgan, with heavy hearts, agreed to honor the dragon's final wish. Ruok's breath grew shallow, his great chest rising and falling with effort. His eyes, once blazing with ancient fire, now dimmed as he turned one last gaze toward Thomas and Dolgan.
Remember,
he murmured, the word barely a breath. Then, with a final exhale that echoed softly through the cavern, the mighty dragon stilled. Silence fell, deep and reverent, the end of an age marked not by battle, but by peace. As the rod touched Roy, light enveloped him, transforming scales to gold and restoring youthful vigor. The cavern trembled with the sound of Fey music, and Roy, reborn in splendor, roared his gratitude to Macros, a fiery blaze illuminating the cavern like a celestial dawn. In a crescendo of light and sound, Roy vanished, leaving behind an emptiness that pressed upon Thomas and Dolgan like the weight of centuries. In the aftermath, Dolgan and Thomas discovered treasures left for them by Ra. Dolgan's eyes widened at the sight of the Hammer of Tholin, a dwarven relic long lost to his people.
Its return will bring rejoicing,
he murmured, reverence in his voice. Thomas found a tabard of white emblazoned with a golden dragon, a shield, helm, and a sword of extraordinary craftsmanship. Though hesitant, Thomas donned the armor, its weight surprisingly light, as if it were meant for him. As they prepared to leave, Dolgan sensed danger looming. In the darkness, the Wraith, a creature of shadow and malice, suddenly attacked. Dolgan's hammer, imbued with ancient power, struck the wraith. But it was Thomas, clad in the dragon's armor, who finally drove it away.
The creature feared you,
Dolgan said, astonished. Thomas, bewildered by his sudden courage and ability, could only shrug.
I just knew what to do,
he replied, sensing the armor's magic. They continued through the tunnels, evading bands of goblins and dark brothers, fleeing from an unseen threat, likely the tyranny. Dolgan observed.
Never have they dared enter our mines in such numbers.
Thomas nodded, noting their beaten state and the presence of women and children. Something dire drove them south. After days of travel, the pair returned to Caldara, weary but unharmed. Thomas was welcomed warmly, though he felt a twinge of longing for Crydee. In the long hall, Dolgan shared news of the Surani encampment near Stone Mountain, confirming Thomas's suspicions.
They've intruded on our lands,
Dolgan declared, his voice a mix of concern and resolve. Yet with winter's grip now firm, neither side could act until spring. Thomas, realizing he would pass winter with the dwarves, felt both anticipation and resignation. The long hall, with its warmth and camaraderie, offered comfort, but his thoughts strayed to familiar faces far away. As he settled into his new reality, he reflected on Rourke's legacy, the gifts left behind, and the promise of adventures yet to unfold. Chapter 6: Storms and Silence. As the weary travellers made their way into Borden, they were flanked by a company of Natalie's rangers, their grey attire blending seamlessly with the misty backdrop of the town. The rangers, descendants of the legendary Keshian guides, were known for their impeccable skills in tracking and horsemanship. Lord Boric masked his irritation at the lack of hospitality from the rangers, who had not offered to let the travellers ride double, despite their evident exhaustion. They had little reason to acknowledge the significance of the Duke's party and the strained relations between the free cities of Natal and the Kingdom of Crydee didn't help either. Pug marvelled at Borden's bustling streets. The city, though modest by kingdom standards, was a sensory overload for the boy, with its cacophony of sounds and vibrant colours. He was both fascinated and overwhelmed by the throngs of people, animals and vehicles that filled the streets. The group was escorted to the office of the local prefect, wherein a man adorned in garish sashes and gold rings greeted them with sceptical detachment. Upon realising their connection to Talbot Kilrain, the city's prominent ships broker, the prefect's demeanour shifted dramatically for the better. Hot coffee was served as a servant was dispatched to summon Kilrain. Corgan whispered to Pug,
"Our host is the sort who waits to see which way the wind blows before making up his mind."
Soon after, Meacham burst into the office, followed by one of Kilrain's senior clerks, who promptly confirmed the Duke's identity. The prefect, now obsequious, apologised for the misunderstanding. Boric cut him off sharply, eager to move on. Once outside, the travellers were swiftly mounted on horses and led through Borden streets to Kilrain's hilltop mansion. The manor, commanding a view of the quiet harbour with its dormant ships, was a bastion of opulence amidst the city's chaos. Talbot Kilrain, with his vulture-like appearance softened by genuine warmth, welcomed Boric and his party.
"Salutations, Lord Boric,"
he said, his eyes full of concern. Despite his sharp features, Kilrain exuded a likeable charm that put Pug at ease. Ignoring attempts to discuss business, Kilrain insisted on rest and nourishment for his guests, promising to talk at length over dinner. Inside, the travellers found luxury and comfort awaiting them. Pug, sharing a room with Corgan, relaxed in a hot bath, the warmth soothing his travel-weary body. As he soaked, his thoughts drifted to his friend Thomas, wondering what had become of him and Dolgan. At dinner, Boric recounted their journey to Kilrain, who listened intently.
"I am, of course, alarmed by the news you bear,"
Kilrain said, his concern evident.
I will send you to Krondor on one of my own ships, the Storm Queen.
His decisive support was a relief to Boric, who was grateful for the merchant's swift action and understanding. And so, the Storm Queen set sail under a foreboding sky, battling the fury of a relentless storm. On its deck, Duke Boric and Captain Abram stood, bracing against the icy rain that stung their faces. Tragedy soon struck as 2 men were lost overboard to the merciless sea.
Can nothing be done?
Boric shouted over the storm's roar.
Nay, my lord, they are dead men,
the captain replied grimly. As the ship's timbers groaned under the strain, the captain made the difficult decision to seek refuge at Sorcerer's Isle. Kulgan and the Duke retreated below deck, where Pug and the others endured the tumultuous voyage. The magician explained to Pug the island's ominous reputation, home to the enigmatic Macros the Black.
Macros is perhaps the greatest sorcerer the world has ever known,
Kulgan told him, though Meacham's tales painted a darker picture. The ship finally limped into the bay of Sorcerer's Isle, where the towering castle of Macros loomed against the stormy sky, its single window glowing with an eerie blue light. They would need to wait for the storm to abate before repairs could be made. With the weather slightly improved, Arutha, Kulgan, Pug, Meacham, and Gardan took a boat ashore, eager to stretch their legs. Despite the island's sinister reputation, the land offered a welcome respite from the confined quarters of the ship. As they rowed toward the beach, the sailors' nervous glances toward the cliffs reminded Pug of the island's dark mysteries. The boat touched upon a sandy stretch, a small cove that disrupted the bluffs of the bay. From there, a path wound upward toward a looming castle and joined another that veered across the island. Pug was first out, helping secure the boat ashore. He felt eyes upon him, yet saw only rocks and seabirds as he scanned the landscape. Kulgan and Prince Arutha studied the paths. The magician suggested exploring the trail away from the sorcerer's castle, a notion met with agreement due to the boredom of being confined on the ship. With a nod, Arutha led the way up the trail, Pug tagging along behind Meacham, the big-shouldered Franklin, who kept a broadsword close. Pug clutched his sling, uneasy with swords, despite Gardan's lessons. The path startled flocks of turnstones and plovers into the air, squawking their protests. They crested the first of several hills, the trail dipping behind another rise.
It must lead somewhere,
Kulgan noted, prompting Arutha to nod, and they pressed on norward until they reached a small, secluded valley, an oasis of sorts, nestled between low hills, where buildings sat deserted.
Are they inhabited?
Arutha asked, softly. Kulgan and Meacham, after a moment's assessment, concluded they were not, noting the absence of smoke or activity. As they descended, Meacham noticed Pug's lack of arms beyond his sling and handed him a hunting knife in silent camaraderie. From a plateau, Pug saw an alien-looking villa surrounded by a low wall. They descended to find barren fruit trees and a neglected garden. A fountain with statues of dolphins stood aged and forlorn.
This is fashioned cleverly,
remarked Kulgan, while Arutha compared it to the king's fountains in Rillanon, albeit with a bit more grace. Pug wondered, observing the house's single story, windows spaced evenly and doors long off their hinges.
Whoever lived here expected no trouble,
Garden observed, noting the absence of defensive structures. Meacham agreed, adding,
This place was fashioned by those who knew little of strife.
Exploring, Pug entered a building with a collapsed roof, discovering storerooms and a large kitchen. He examined a dusty bronze pot, only to glimpse movement at the cookhouse door.
Meacham, Garden,
he called, moving outside. Spotting movement near the main house's rear door, he assumed his companions were ahead and followed on. Further inside, Pug found an open courtyard with a central garden and another dilapidated fountain. He ventured down a shadowy corridor, the light guiding him past empty rooms. Turning a corner, He entered a mosaic-adorned room with a pool-like depression.
It is a tepidarium,
a voice announced, startling Pug. A man stood before him, average in height, with deep-set black eyes and a brown robe.
Put up your scramasax. I mean you no harm.
He smiled, easing Pug's tension. The man explained the room's purpose, a prelude to a series of bathing rituals foreign to Pug's understanding. The man's easy demeanor invited Pug's curiosity.
How did you know my name?
Pug asked. The traveler claimed to have overheard Pug's name, adding,
I was watching you, ensuring you were not pirates.
Pug, intrigued but cautious, learned the traveler was a hermit, once living in the villa, now content in solitude.
I have been called many things,
the traveler said.
But here I am, the hermit.
Their conversation was interrupted by the others calling for Pug.
Come,
the traveler said, leading him back to the courtyard. As Pug rejoined his companions, weapons were drawn, but the traveler's open hands signaled peace.
Who is your companion, Pug?
Asked Arutha. Pug introduced the traveler, assuring them of his harmlessness. The traveler explained he abided on the island, and they were welcome at Villa Beata, as he called the place. Kulgan engaged the traveler in conversation, learning the villa's history, a refuge from a distant war, its inhabitants long vanished. The traveler's words carried a weight of experience, suggesting an age beyond appearance.
I doubt the Black One troubles you,
Meacham questioned. The traveler mused.
Macros the Black and I have little cause to be at odds.
Arutha, taking in the villa's desolation, decided it was time to return to the ship. As they prepared to leave, the traveler offered Kulgan his staff to aid a twisted ankle, a gesture of goodwill.
Perhaps I shall reclaim it someday,
the traveler remarked enigmatically. As they set sail with favorable winds, Pug discovered a parchment slipped inside his tunic, its message revealing the traveler's true identity.
I welcome those who come with no malice in their hearts. Our meeting was no accident. Keep the hermit's staff as a token of goodwill. Seek me only when the time is right. Macros.
Pug found himself adrift in the opulence of Krondor's prince's palace, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts as he sat by the window, watching the relentless snowfall. The last few days had been a blur of idle waiting, punctuated by the rare moments he was summoned to speak to the Prince of Crondor, Erland. Despite his high rank, the prince was a young man, surprisingly warm and understanding, though his health seemed precarious, marked by fits of coughing that left him pale and sweating. Pug's recounting of the Serani ship had been met with a gravity that underscored the urgency of the situation, yet his role in the grander scheme was minimal, leaving him to wander the palace alone. His thoughts often drifted to Thomas, his missing friend, and the old life left behind in Crydee. The trappings of nobility, the fine clothes, and the luxurious accommodations, though unfamiliar, did little to distract him from the loneliness. Seeking something to break the monotony, Pug ventured into the corridors, where he stumbled upon a small alcove, offering a view of the snow-blanketed city below. As he mused over the distant port, a small voice interrupted his solitude.
Are you Prince Arutha?
A young girl asked, her eyes wide and curious.
No, I'm Pug. I came with the prince,
he replied, noting her disappointment. The girl introduced herself as Princess Anita, her youthful innocence and regal bearing reminding Pug of Carline, the Duke's daughter back in Crydee. As they spoke, Anita expressed a childlike curiosity about the world and her future, particularly about the prospect of marrying Prince Arutha someday. Pug found himself charmed by her, and as she left, he assured her that Arutha was indeed a nice man. That evening, the palace was alive with festivity, a grand banquet in honor of Pug's party. Despite the lavish surroundings and the throng of nobles, Pug felt out of place, seated far from the royal table, where the real discussions were taking place. The air was filled with music and laughter, yet the talk among the highest-ranking guests was subdued. heavy with the weight of unspoken concerns. After dinner, Pug slipped away from the crowd, only to encounter Princess Anita once more. She had snuck away from her rooms, eager to catch a glimpse of Arutha. Pug obliged her, lifting her to see over the crowd. Their brief exchange was interrupted by approaching footsteps, and Anita fled, leaving Pug to cover for her absence. Back in his room, Pug found Kulgan waiting with news. They were to leave for Rillanon at first light, summoned by the king. Before he could digest this, Prince Arutha burst in, his anger barely contained. The Prince of Crondor had decided to wait for the king's permission before mobilizing the western armies, despite the threat posed by the Sureni. Arutha's frustration was palpable, the delay a bitter pill in the face of impending danger. Kulgan explained the political intricacies to Pug, the delicate balance of power between the prince and the king, a tension that could lead to civil strife if mishandled. Pug, still a boy at heart, despite his noble status, struggled to grasp the implications, but the gravity of the situation was clear. The next morning, they set off, the prince bidding them farewell with a troubled demeanor. As they rode out, Pug couldn't shake the feeling of homesickness, the journey ahead promising more uncertainty. The escort of Crondorian lancers was a mark of honor, yet the road to Salador was long, with the winter's chill a constant companion. The ride took longer than expected, delays caused by a fierce storm in the mountains and a diversion to assist a village plagued by bandits. The simplicity of the village's hospitality was a welcome respite for Pug, a reminder of the life he had left behind. Yet the journey was relentless, each day bringing them closer to Rillanon and whatever awaited them there. As dusk descended over the lands near Salador, the group of travel-weary Crondorians encountered a patrol of city guards. The guard captain, suspicious of their presence, demanded,
"What business brings the Prince's Guard to the lands of Salador?"
Unfazed, Duke Boric cast aside his cloak to reveal his tabard.
Carry word to your master that Boric, Duke of Crydee, approaches the city and would avail himself of Lord Karis's hospitality.
The guard captain, visibly startled, stammered an apology.
"My apologies, Your Grace. I had no idea. There was no banner."
Arutha, Boric's son, interjected dryly.
"We mislaid it in a forest some time back."
Confusion crossed the captain's face.
"My lord?"
Boric waved off the exchange.
Never mind, Captain. Just send word to your master.
The captain saluted, dispatched a rider to the city, and offered his men's services to the Duke. Boric declined, with a wry smile, noting the Salador City Guard's reputation for maintaining peace. The captain, oblivious to the jest, seemed puffed up with pride.
"Thank you, Your Grace."
As the guards departed, Arutha remarked,
"Father, we have need of men like that in the West."
Boric chuckled.
"Oh, how so?"
"To polish shields and boots,"
Arutha replied, invoking laughter from the party. As they rode on, the signs of civilization grew. Farms, villages, and bustling trade routes. By sundown, the walls of Salador loomed ahead. They entered the city, greeted by Duke Karis's household guards, and made their way to the palace. The grandeur of Salador made Pug realize just how much Crydee was a frontier town, despite Boric's political influence. Upon reaching the palace, they were greeted by Lord Karis, who, after formalities, expressed grave concern over the kingdom's state.
"This is grave news indeed, Lord Boric. Things are unsettled in the kingdom,"
he said, a shadow of worry crossing his face. Boric recounted the events of the past months, and Karis nodded, his expression troubled.
"Our king is not the man he once was. Sometimes he seems himself, filled with grand plans. Other times he is someone else."
As they conversed, Karis explained the political unrest since King Roderick took the throne.
"When the crown was presented to Erland, he refused, conceding to Roderick. No one knew of Erlin's ill health, so it seemed a generous affirmation of Roderick's claim.
Boric listened intently, his concern deepening with each revelation. Keris continued,
Guy Dubas Tyra is now closest to the king, and we have little love between us. His star rises as mine falls.
Boric's expression hardened.
You speak of treason.
Keris shook his head.
Treason in men's hearts, if not in deeds, yet.
He paused, the weight of his words hanging in the cold air.
Take care, Boric, for only Erlin stands closer to the throne than yourself. Roderick sees daggers and poison where none exist.
Their conversation continued, with Keris urging Boric to use his influence to steer the king's focus toward the impending invasion from the west.
We need to stand united. A lengthy war would drain us of what little reserves we possess.
Later that evening, as the palace quieted and the weight of the day settled over its guests, Keris's words echoed faintly in Pug's mind.
I pray that this invasion will not be the wave that drowns us.
As he lay in the darkness of his opulent room, he realized that his dreams of a united kingdom, rallying to Crydee's aid, were as fragile as the light of the slowly extinguishing candle by his bedside. Chapter 7, Beyond the Veil. Pug stood on the foredeck of the ship, his cloak pulled tightly around him as they sailed into the harbour of Rewritten. The journey from Salador had been uneventful, albeit longer than anticipated, but the sight of Rewritten banished any lingering fatigue. Known as the Jewel of the Kingdom, the city was a breathtaking sprawl of tall spires, arched bridges, and winding roads, perched atop rolling hills. The banners and pennons danced in the wind, celebrating the city's mere existence. The ship carried the ducal banner of Boric, Duke of Crydee, and it was given priority at the royal quay. As they disembarked, they were greeted by a company of the royal household guard, led by the venerable Duke Coldrick. The older man embraced Boric warmly.
Boric, it is good to see you once more. What has it been, 10, 11 years?
13,
Boric corrected with a smile. Coldrick then turned to Arutha, Boric's son, recognizing the family resemblance.
You do honor to my family,
he said, his eyes soft with nostalgia. Boric inquired about the city, but Coldrick, with a serious tone, suggested they continue the conversation at the king's palace. The party mounted their horses and rode through the bustling streets of Rewritten. To Pug, the city was a marvel, a testament to the king's vision of beauty and order. The grandeur of Rewritten left him speechless, a city of bridges, canals, and colourful stonework. The palace loomed ahead, a college of rainbow-hued buildings connected by long halls. As they entered the courtyard, trumpets sounded, and the guard stood at attention. The formality of the welcoming nobles paled in comparison to Coldrick's personal warmth. Pug, observing from the background, felt the insincerity of the courtiers' pleasantries aimed at Boric. Inside, the accommodations were lavish beyond Pug's imagination. A steward attended to his needs, preparing a bath to wash away the weariness of the voyage. As he soaked in the tub, Pug mused about what his friend Thomas would think of such luxury, and memories of the lovely Princess Carleen. The following day, Boric's party found themselves in the royal throne room, awaiting presentation to the king. The hall was a spectacle of opulence, filled with nobles adorned in extravagant attire. Boric, though finely dressed, seemed modest amidst the peacock-like splendor. King Roderick, with a familial resemblance to Arutha, greeted Boric with a smile.
Welcome to our city, cousin. It is good to see Crydee in this hall after so many years.
Boric presented his companions, and when Pug was introduced, the king chuckled.
The boy who kills trolls. How wonderful.
Pug bowed awkwardly, wishing the story of his troll encounter hadn't spread so far. The king announced a ball in Boric's honor, then retreated with Boric to speak privately, leaving Pug and the others to wait in a richly appointed room. As they waited, concern grew. Boric returned, troubled by the king's lack of urgency regarding the Tsurani threat.
He listened, and then calmly informed me that he would consider the matter.
Boric said, frustration edging his voice. The next day, Pug was summoned to a private meeting with the king. The young squire felt the weight of anticipation as he approached the king's private balcony. Roderick, dismissing formality, invited Pug to sit. They spoke of Rillinen's beauty and Roderick's vision for the kingdom's future. Pug found the king's ramblings both intriguing and perplexing. When the king inquired about the Princess Carleen, Pug praised her intelligence and spirit. Roderick mused about seeking a queen, finding the Eastern ladies lacking in substance. Pug carefully avoided mentioning the political tension with Anita's father, Prince Erland. The king, somewhat erratic, shifted topics again, asking Pug's opinion on the Tsurani. Startled, Pug chose his words with care.
From everything I have seen and heard, Your Majesty, I think these Tsurani people not only are planning to invade, but they are already here.
Roderick raised an eyebrow, intrigued.
Oh? I would like to hear your reasoning.
Pug explained that the numerous sightings suggested a far greater presence than they were aware of. The king listened, his expression thoughtful.
A good exercise in logic, Pug.
Roderick acknowledged, signaling subtly for a feast to begin. As they dined, the king's mood shifted from engaged to pensive, his mind wandering into realms unknown. Pug, unsure of the courtly etiquette in such moments, opted for respectful silence. Yet Roderick's sudden turn to lamentation pierced the quiet.
Why do these people come to plague us now?
His worry spilled over, manifesting in a restless pacing. Days later, the men of Crydee gathered for another somber meal. The Duke Boric was restless, eager to return westward. Spring promised that Tsurani would strike soon. Arutha mirrored his father's agitation, and even Kulgan, usually composed, showed signs of strain. Pug, too, yearned for Crydee, for the familiarity of his studies, and for Carline, whose memory had softened with time. As the meal drew to a close, Duke Coldrick entered, immediately commanding attention.
Boric, I am sorry to interrupt your dinner, but I have news.
The message was grave. Duke Guy of Bastira had questioned the urgency of the Tsurani threat. The room erupted with Boric's fury.
What game does Guy play at?
His anger was volcanic, but Coldrick's a steady hand calmed him.
Guy plays to advance his own banner.
Boric's ire subsided, giving way to strategy. Arutha, ever perceptive, speculated that Guy might let the West suffer, only to emerge as its saviour. The room buzzed with this new thread of intrigue, leading to a consensus. If the king would not allow Boric to lead, perhaps Duke Bruchol could command the armies, with Boric as his advisor. Coldrick, with a newfound vigour, promised to present this solution to the king. Hope flickered amidst the gathered men, a fragile light in the shadow of war. The morning's tranquility shattered with a royal summons. Pug joined the others before a dishevelled king, who was a tempest of emotions.
Bruchol has let the Tsurani destroy a garrison. Look at these.
He flung parchments toward Boric in a fit. Kulgan quietly passed them along, but the king dismissed them with a manic wave.
They've attacked Wallinor, the Elven Forests, Stone Mountain, Crydee.
Boric blurted,
What news from Crydee?
The king paused, his eyes briefly wild. He steadied himself.
Liam reports victory. The aliens were driven back.
Coldrick added that the attacks were sudden and widespread, but there was no sign of Tsurani cavalry. Roderick sat, clutching his temple.
They dare attack my soldiers. Who cares about their horses?
Boric, leave Crydee to your sons. I'm giving you the banner of the armies of the West.
The king's decree was both a burden and a beacon, pushing them into action as news of the Tsurani's invasions reached them. The urgency of departure was palpable. As Pug prepared to leave, he was torn between duty and the comfort of Crydee. At the harbour, organised chaos reigned. Horses stamped impatiently, crates clattered, sailors shouted across the docks, preparing for swift departure. The ship that would carry them eastward bobbed in the tide, sails half raised, snapping like war drums in the wind. Pug paused on the gangplank, taking one last look at the city skyline. He turned to Meacham and said with quiet resolve,
"Where Kulgan goes, I go."
Meacham nodded slowly, a trace of respect in his eyes. In the damp stillness of a rain-soaked spring, war's bitter business trudged on, mired in mud and uncertainty. Duke Bruchel of Yabon and Lord Boric huddled over a table heavy with maps, their brows furrowed as the rain drummed a relentless rhythm on the tent above. Smoke from lanterns and Kulgan's ever-present pipe mingled in the air, a testament to the magician's constant presence and invaluable counsel. With a wizard's sight, Kulgan could glimpse the Sirani's movements, though never clearly enough to predict their next strike. His tactical mind had become a cornerstone in the defense against the invaders. Bruchel's voice cut through the oppressive atmosphere, pointing to the newest map.
They've taken these points and hold them with a grip we can't break. Their path follows the eastern face of the Grey Towers, but damn it if I can tell where they're headed.
Boric nodded, his gaze fixed on the array of red spots marking Sirani strongholds.
Their plan is clear in one aspect: dig in and hold. They don't pursue, which is maddening. There's a pattern, but it's just beyond grasp.
A guard's entrance interrupted their musings.
An elf seeks entrance, my lords.
Let him in,
Bruchel replied, a flicker of curiosity breaking his weary demeanor. The elf entered, rain-soaked but undeterred.
Greetings from my queen,
he began, his gaze dropping to the map.
The Outworlders move many soldiers through this pass, advancing to the Elven Forest edge but not entering. Your western forces can't join you, the pass is blocked.
How strong are they?
Bruchel inquired.
An unknown, but several thousand march along the northern pass. The dwarves remain untouched unless they venture south.
Boric's brow furrowed.
Any sign of cavalry?
None. Infantry only.
Kulgan interjected.
Father Tully's theory of them being horseless holds true.
As Bruchel marked the map with new information, Boric addressed the elf.
Return my greetings to your queen and wish her good health. If your runners go west, carry the same message to my sons.
The elf bowed and departed, leaving behind a room thick with contemplation. Kulgan studied the map, a realization dawning.
They form a half circle, a bridgehead. They're preparing for something, securing their foothold.
Bruchel's eyes widened with understanding.
A bridgehead! They're stockpiling, readying for an offensive.
Boric turned to Kulgan.
What do you make of it?
Kulgan pondered.
Their magic's limits are unknown. They might need this valley's space, or a limited window for troop passage.
Boric's decision came swiftly.
We must send a party into the valley to uncover their intent.
Kulgan volunteered.
I'll go. If magic's involved, soldiers might not grasp it.
Boric nodded.
Take Pug. If one of you falls, the other will carry on the news.
The plan unfolded with urgency. If they struck at the North Pass, the Sirani's forces could be drawn into the valley. A small, swift company might break through an eastern pass. Pug lay in his tent, wrapped in a blanket, attempting to nap when Kulgan entered. Meekum tended the cook fire, keeping it away from Fantis, the fire drake. The creature had joined them a week prior, causing no small stir among the soldiers. Kulgan had been glad for the company, though puzzled by how the drake had found them. Kulgan's announcement was met with Pug's excitement.
An expedition into Sirani territory to discover their secrets. You and Meacham will accompany me.
Pug's boyish dreams of soldiering resurfaced.
My blade is sharp, Kulgan. I'm ready.
Meacham's laughter was cut short by Coulgan's glare.
Good, Pug. But we aim to avoid fighting. We'll ride in deep, then retreat with our findings.
Perhaps we'll capture a prisoner.
Pug mused.
It'd be a change,
Meacham noted. The Surani preferred death to capture, their ferocity unmatched.
But why are they invading us?
Pug wondered aloud.
Metal, I reckon.
Meacham answered simply, holding a wood-tipped Surani arrow.
Their world lacks it. They covet ours.
Coulgan's epiphany struck.
Of course. Our metals. They're setting up in a high valley near the dwarven mines. I must inform the dukes.
Pug pondered Meacham's insight.
Why would they not just trade?
The Surani are a proud, warlike people.
Meacham responded.
They just didn't consider it as an option.
Morning found the column moving through misty forests, outriders scouting ahead for ambushes. Captain Vandross led the mission, level-headed and capable. Pug rode alongside Coulgan and Meacham, armoured and feeling every bit of the soldier.
We'll attack the enemy camp. You'll pass it continuing toward the mountains. If we don't rejoin you by sundown, proceed alone.
Vandross announced. Resting before the attack, Pug felt the thrill of adventure, forgetting past terrors, focused on the moment before him. Before he knew it, the charge began, swift and brutal. A thunderous gallop through thinning trees. Pug strained to adjust his eyes to the dimness as his horse galloped headlong through the trees. The Surani soldiers, swathed in vibrant colours that flickered like elusive phantoms among the trunks, scrambled to intercept the riders. Yet the thick woods hampered their efforts, granting Pug and his companions a fleeting advantage of surprise. The lieutenant's voice cut through the clamour, sharp and commanding.
All right, they've seen us. Ride hard and stay close.
With that, the horsemen surged forward, the forest echoing with the clash of impending conflict. Pug's heart pounded in rhythm with the hooves beneath him as he leaned low, making himself a smaller target for the arrows that whizzed past like angry bees. Breaking into a clearing, they met a scattered line of Surani defenders. Most soldiers faltered, scattering like leaves before the wind, save for one brave soul who stood his ground with a mighty swing of his blue sword. Pug winced as a horse screamed, its rider thrown by the brutal impact, yet he pressed on, driven by purpose and the momentum of the charge. The world narrowed to a tunnel of motion and sound, arrows slicing the air, the cries of men and beasts blending into a cacophony of survival. As they sped away from the chaos, Pug's mind raced with the lieutenant's words.
From here on, make straight north,
he had ordered.
We're almost to the meadow. Speed is your only ally.
The meadow loomed, a vast expanse where concealment would be impossible, demanding a final burst of speed from their weary horses. With swords drawn, they plunged forward, the air thick with arrows that thudded into shields and armor, a deadly rain that tested their resolve. Pug felt the jarring impact of one glancing off his helm, a reminder of the peril they faced, yet he pressed on, driven by determination and the hope of reaching safety. Amid the chaos, Pug found himself beside Coulgan, the seasoned magician who had been his mentor. The sight of the old man, shouting encouragement and pointing to his own face in a gesture of concern, filled Pug with a surge of determination. He waved his sword in response, a silent promise that he was still in the fight. But the battle was far from over. A black-robed figure appeared as if from nowhere, a sinister device in hand that crackled with ominous energy. Pug watched in horror as Coulgan's horse fell, the magician rolling with surprising agility to confront his attacker. Pug charged back, striking the enemy down, his heart pounding with the urgency of Coulgan's warning.
Thank you, Pug.
Coulgan gasped, struggling to his feet.
I don't think I could have bettered him. We must warn Lord Boric. The Surani can bring in hundreds of men a day through that rift. Their magicians are too powerful. We need reinforcements.
Despite Coulgan's protests, Pug hefted him onto his horse, sending them galloping towards safety. Turning, he saw the Surani magician rising. Seizing the chance, Pug charged again, knocking him down once more. The man raised a hand, seemingly surrendering, but pain suddenly tore through Pug's body. It was magic. He staggered, Meacham's voice faintly reaching the corner of his mind. Suddenly, the pain vanished as the magician drew a small, humming device. Pug rushed forward, desperate to stop whatever the device would unleash. He slammed into the magician again, but it was too late. The artifact ignited with searing white and blue light. The battlefield vanished in a storm of color and energy. Pug felt himself pulled, spinning, falling through a blaze of colors, plunging into an abyss of darkness. When he awoke, bound and disoriented, Pug found himself in a Surani camp, a prisoner among his enemies. Fear clawed at his heart, but he forced himself to focus, taking in every detail that might prove useful. The Surani, with their strange and vibrant banners, their alien language and customs, were unlike anything he had ever encountered. Yet even in captivity, Pug's resolve hardened, his mind working tirelessly to find a way to survive and escape. Brought before a Surani lord, Pug faced a barrage of questions, a truth-telling device clutched in his hand. The lord, a figure of authority and power, watched him with cold detachment, while a magician translated, struggling with the nuances of Pug's language. Pug answered cautiously, revealing only what he must, while desperately trying to conceal the full extent of his knowledge.
Clever slave may live long time,
the magician warned, his smile a thin veneer over the threat.
Too clever slave dies quickly, if he is fortunate.
Pug was escorted back to the holding area and left alone with his thoughts. Around him, a handful of other captives stirred. Most wore blank, defeated expressions, their spirits clearly broken. One man wept quietly, his shoulders trembling in the dim light. Pug lifted his gaze to the horizon, where the first blush of dawn tinged the mountains in the east with a soft pink glow. Chapter 8, Dreams in the Dark. The rain drummed incessantly against the rocks outside the cave, wherein a group of dwarves huddled around a small cook fire, their faces shadowed by the grim circumstances. Dolgan puffed on his pipe, while the others busied themselves with armor repairs, the rhythmic clinking of metal punctuating the silence. Amidst them, Thomas sat alone, detached, his eyes unfocused, as though peering into a world far beyond the cave. The dwarves of the Grey Towers had valiantly fought the Surani invaders 7 times by now, each battle leaving their numbers painfully diminished against the seemingly endless enemy. Thomas, with his golden helm and broadsword, had led the charge each time, a beacon of hope and fear on the battlefield. The magical nature of his armor, once doubted, now undeniable after it had warded off a wraith, transformed him into a hero. Yet with each battle, an unexplainable elation filled him, growing into an urgent force accompanied by visions. Visions of a world long gone, of halls adorned with golden trappings and unfamiliar laughter echoing through his mind. Dolgan's voice cut through the visions as he offered Thomas a bowl of stew.
Will you take some food, laddie?
Thomas, half aware, accepted the bowl, the vision dissipating as he did so.
Are you all right, Thomas?
Dolgan asked, concern etched in his features. Thomas, hesitant, replied,
I'm not sure, just tired, I guess.
Dolgan observed the young man, noting the transformation in him since donning the dragon's gift armor, a transformation not entirely for good or ill. The fellowship of dwarves was interrupted by the arrival of Grimsworth, a Natalese ranger, his voice hoarse from his trek through the wet forests.
Hail, Dolgan of the Grey Towers.
The ranger brought grim news. The Surani had fortified their position and were preparing for another assault. Dolgan, perplexed, questioned the strategy, but Grimsworth shared that the magician Kulgan believed the Sorani sought metals from the mines. Dolgan inquired about the elven folk, but Grimsworth had little news, except for a rumour of goblins clashing with the Sorani near the Lake of the Sky.
Perhaps we could arrange for them to battle each other,
he joked, but Dolgan remained wary. As Grimsworth prepared to leave, he turned to Thomas.
I bring you a message from Lord Boric,
he said. The news was grave. Pug, Thomas's friend, had fallen and was captured during a raid. Thomas withdrew into the cave, overwhelmed by grief that transformed into a chilling fury. Returning to the fire, he told Grimsworth,
"Tell the Duke I thank him for thinking of me."
Despite the offer to return to Crydee, Thomas chose to stay, driven by a sense of purpose. As night fell, Thomas was again haunted by visions of a bygone era, of warriors in white tabards emblazoned with golden dragons. The visions grew more vivid, but Thomas shook them off, focusing on the task at hand. In the tunnels, he and the dwarves set an ambush for the Sorani. The battle was fierce, the dwarves' axes and hammers clashing with the Sorani broadswords. Thomas was a whirlwind of motion, fighting with uncanny skill, his armor untouched by dirt or blood. Suddenly, the battle took a dire turn, when unknown creatures joined the fray, their insect-like forms scrambling down the rock faces. The dwarves, caught between the Sorani and these new foes, fought valiantly, but the enemy's numbers swelled. Thomas called for a retreat, his voice cutting sternly through the chaos. As they fell back, Thomas's golden sword cut through the enemy lines, his battle cry echoing with words even he did not understand. Pressed against the wall of the passage, Thomas felt the visions surge, the long-dead race calling to him. Shaking off the images, he returned to the present, signaling to Dolgan. The dwarves, outnumbered, fought their way back, Thomas leading the charge. In the chaos, Thomas's sword gleamed, a beacon of hope amidst despair. The air drew thick with the acrid scent of battle, mingling with the cries of the wounded and dying. Thomas, his shield hanging heavily from his arm, took 2 bulging skins filled with naphtha from a dwarf who had stayed behind.
"Be ready to chump,"
he commanded, his voice a clarion call amidst the clamor. As Dolgan and his fighters leaped back over the corpses, Thomas hurled the skins into the midst of the fray. The naphtha ignited instantly, a raging inferno that consumed the tunnel and the Sorani caught within. For a heartbeat, Thomas stood silhouetted against the flames, a dark figure amidst the white heat.
"They'll be upon us when the flames die,"
Dolgan warned, urgency lacing his words. Together, they fled through the twisting passages, the echoes of pursuit ringing in their ears. As they paused to listen, Dolgan's fears were confirmed.
"They come! Hundreds with their creatures. They mount a major offensive."
Dolgan quickly assessed their dwindling numbers. 70 out of the original 150, many wounded.
"We must make for the forest,"
he ordered, leading his comrades away from the suffocating darkness of the tunnels. Thomas ran with them, wrestling with a torrent of visions that assailed him. Faces of his enemies morphed into something otherworldly, and phantom memories of a blood-soaked ceremony taunted him. Shaking his head, he pushed the images aside, focusing on Dolgan's strategy.
"We must find another stronghold,"
Dolgan mused.
"Perhaps Stone Mountain, though the Sorani will soon have these mines."
Hatred simmered within Thomas, a cold fire ignited by the Sorani's relentless invasion. They had ravaged his homeland, stolen his brother, and now left dwarven friends dead beneath the mountain. His resolve hardened. He would see these invaders destroyed. Through the trees they moved, wary of Sorani patrols. Skirmishers had reduced their numbers further, and now only 52 remained. The wounded had been taken to safety, but the forest offered little reprieve. The way east was blocked, forcing them northward toward Elvendar, the elven stronghold.
"A camp at the ford,"
a scout reported. Dolgan considered the challenge. Dwarves were not swimmers, and the Sorani likely guarded every crossing. Thomas suggested they wait for nightfall, a plan Dolgan accepted. They found refuge in a hollow beneath a massive boulder, waiting for darkness to cloak their next move. Thomas continued to tangle with his waking dreams, visions of a past not his own, a warrior named Ashen Sugar, brooding over conquered lands and lives. The elf princess, Alengwan, cowered beside him, her beauty a fragile shield against his whims. The echoes of her fear and his indifference haunted Thomas, mingling with the strains of ancient music.
Thomas?
Dolgan's voice cut through the haze.
It's time. Night has fallen.
They crept toward the river, shadows among shadows, until a patrol's shout shattered the night. Thomas acted swiftly, dispatching a Surani guard, but drawing attention in the process. As battle erupted, he held the line, buying precious moments for the dwarves to cross. Suddenly, arrows fell from behind them like rain, elven archery striking at the Surani.
Quickly, man, follow me.
An unseen voice urged, and Thomas retreated, a Surani arrow piercing his leg. Dizzy and reeling, he collapsed on the far bank of the river, darkness swallowing him whole. When light returned, Thomas found himself among elves, his body healed but weak.
You have been very ill.
An elf informed him, explaining the Surani's venomous arrows. 3 days had passed since the battle, and now he was to be taken to Elvendar. Guided by Prince Callan and his kin, Thomas marveled at the forest's serenity, a stark contrast to the chaos he had known. As they moved, Thomas felt a curious harmony within, a peace that eluded him elsewhere. Reaching Elvendar as night fell, Thomas was awestruck by the City of Trees, a living testament to elven magic. Aglarana, the elf queen, welcomed him, her court a vivid tapestry of colour and grace. Dolgan greeted him, relief evident.
Well, laddie, I'm glad to see you recovered.
What's going on? Why are we here?
Thomas questioned. It's bad. We were cut off. I suspect we'll be among the elven folk for some time.
Dolgan admitted, a slight grin cresting his visage.
And I'm not fond of these lofty heights.
Thomas let out a laugh, and Dolgan smiled. It was the first time he'd heard that sound since the boy had donned the mystical dragon armor. Across the continent, wagons creaked and groaned under their heavy loads as they rolled down the road from Crydee Castle to the beach. Prince Arutha, Fanon, and Prince Liam rode ahead, leading their soldiers who flanked the wagons. A ragged crowd of townspeople followed, carrying bundles and pulling carts, seeking refuge in the ships waiting at the shore. Crydee, once a bustling town, now lay in ruins, the acrid blue haze of destruction hanging over it. The Surani had raided 2 nights before, setting fire to the docks and damaging ships. The flames had spread into the heart of the town, consuming the whole of the craftmasters, inns, and homes. Arutha had watched helplessly from the castle walls, frustrated by Fanon's orders to hold the garrison until dawn. The orders had come for Liam to leave Crydee, to join their father in Yubban. Arutha, however, was left behind, chafing under the command of Swordmaster Fanon.
Something on your mind, brother?
Liam asked, pulling his horse beside Arutha's. Arutha shook his head.
Just envious of you,
he replied, his voice tinged with bitterness. Liam offered a conciliatory smile.
You're needed here, Arutha. Father's orders were clear.
Arutha sighed.
How needed can I be when every suggestion I make is ignored?
Liam sympathized, but defended their father's decision.
Times change, brother. We must hold here and protect what we have.
As they reached the beach, longboats waited to ferry the townspeople to the ships offshore. The captains dared not return to the quayside, fearful of another attack. Tearful goodbyes were exchanged as families parted, most of the men staying behind to rebuild and defend their home. Liam dismounted and prepared to leave. Fanon bid him a formal farewell, but the brothers embraced warmly.
Take care of Fanon,
Liam advised, Arutha grinning.
I'd not care to think what would happen here should father pass you over once more and name Algon commander of the garrison.
Arutha groaned at the thought, knowing Algon's expertise lay solely with horses. As Liam's longboat pulled away, Arutha watched until it vanished into the distance. He returned to the castle, pausing to curse the Surani ship that had crashed against the rocks at Sailor's Grief, setting this chain of events in motion. Carleen stood atop the southern tower, watching the horizon, her cloak wrapped tightly against the breeze. She had bid Liam farewell from the castle, unwilling to show her fears. Roland, who had also stayed behind, joined her.
You did not ride to the beach with Liam?
She asked, softly. Roland, bitter about being left behind, replied,
No, Your Highness.
A tension had grown between them since Pug's capture, and Roland's confession revealed his struggle.
Why did you stop, Roland?
Carline asked, her voice trembling. His anger erupted.
I can't contend with the memory, Carline. Pug is dead, and until you accept that, you're living with false hope.
Carline fled, tears streaming, leaving Roland alone with his regret. Back at the castle, a patrol returned with prisoners. 3 men in grey robes. Arutha, intrigued, called for Father Tully, the only one who might understand their language. The middle prisoner, Chakachakala, was revealed to be a former Surani officer.
And if we set you free, what then?
Arutha asked the slave. Chakachakala pledged allegiance to Arutha, offering his life and service. Fanon was skeptical, fearing a trick, but Chakachakala's earnestness swayed Arutha.
We should just call him Charles,
suggested Martin, when Arutha struggled with the Surani's name. The name stuck, and Charles was taken away for further questioning. Martin Longbow, ever observant, noted Fanon's discomfort with command.
He'd give all he owns to have your father back,
he told Arutha.
If anything happens to Fanon, name another swordmaster quickly. Algon is a fool, not to be trusted.
Arutha, though initially annoyed, knew Martin was right. He watched Fanon walk away, realizing the responsibility weighed heavily on the old swordmaster. Roland, witnessing the exchange, commented on Arutha and Martin.
You're pretty similar, you know. You both have that same cutting edge to your humor,
he said, attempting to lighten the mood. The night roared on, cracking with the fury of a summer storm, skies ablaze with jagged lightning. Roland stood atop the southern tower, his mood as turbulent as the night. The day had been unkind, marked by unsettling conversations and the piercing silence from Carline that lingered ever since their last meeting on the tower. He watched the storm, the pain in Carline's eyes haunting him.
What a witless fool I am,
he muttered, the words barely audible over the storm's wrath. A soft voice replied,
Not a fool, Roland.
Carline stood nearby, her presence masked by the thunder until now. She drew the shawl tighter around herself, eyes still on the storm.
It's a poor night to be upon the tower, my lady,
Roland said, trying to conceal his surprise.
Will it rain? These hot nights bring thunder and lightning, but usually little rain.
She pondered, standing beside him.
It will,
he replied, casting a glance at the stairs.
Where are your ladies?
They wait below. They fear the lightning, and I wish to speak with you alone.
Silence fell between them, the night filled with nature's fury. At last, Carleen broke it, reminiscing about her father's tales of gods sporting in the sky during such storms. Roland shared his own father's darker interpretation, and they both smiled, the weight of past days easing slightly. Carleen turned to him, her voice softer.
Roland, you spoke truly the day Liam left. I've been lost in grief, unable to see the truth. Pug would have told me nothing is forever, that living in the past robs us of the future.
Roland listened as she spoke of her father's change after her mother's death, empathy replacing his earlier laughter.
But you did not come here to speak of your brother or Martin.
Roland pressed gently.
No, I came to apologize. I've been angry with you, but it was misplaced. You only told me the truth. I've treated you badly.
Roland was taken aback.
You've not treated me badly, Carleen. I acted the boor.
Carleen shook her head.
No, you've been a friend. You told me the truth, not what I wanted to hear. It must have been hard, considering how you feel.
They stood together, a shared understanding easing the burden of unsaid words. Carleen placed her hand on his arm, seeking reassurance.
Will you always be my good friend?
Roland felt the sincerity in her voice, dispelling any lingering frustration at her lack of romantic feelings.
I will, Carleen. I'll always be your good friend.
They embraced, finding solace in one another's presence. As the storm raged on, neither one noticed the unknown ship approaching silently in the harbour. The wind howled as rain began to fall, casting eerie reflections across the castle walls. Arutha stood on the battlements, straining to see through the darkness.
There, Highness, did you see?
A soldier pointed out to sea. Arutha squinted, frustration mounting.
I can see nothing in this darkness. It's blacker than a Guiswan priest's soul out there.
Another lightning flash revealed a ship in the distance.
It needs the Long Point beacon to reach the harbour safely.
Arutha raced down the stairs, urgency in his step. At the gate, he ordered a horse and 2 riders, the night warm and wet as the rain ceased. Fannin met him in the courtyard.
What's this all about? Riding out at this hour?
A ship makes for the harbour and there's no beacon at Long Point.
Arutha's horse arrived, and Fannin nodded slowly.
Well, you'd best be off then.
The gates swung open, and Arutha and his company galloped down the road, the scent of rain and salt mingling with burnt wood as they neared town. The docks loomed, silent witnesses to the night's unfolding events. As they reached the lighthouse, lightning revealed a ship running full sail toward the harbour.
They'll pile upon the rocks without a beacon,
Arutha shouted, just as a figure on the tower signalled the ship. Suddenly, black-clad men swarmed the causeway, and Arutha's companion cried out, struck by an arrow. Chaos erupted as Arutha charged into the fray, toppling foes with his horse. His steed fell, arrows in its neck, as Arutha rolled free, engaging in a desperate battle. Lightning illuminated his path, revealing more and more enemies. He struck one down, only to be pulled into the fray, struggling to open a path to escape and warn the castle. The world spun as he fell, icy water closing over him. The shock kept him conscious, and he surfaced, gulping air before ducking below again to avoid arrows. Clinging to the rocks, he moved toward the tower, evading the invaders. He climbed the lighthouse, lighting the beacon with a desperate spark. Flames roared to life, the signal unmistakable. Relief washed over him as the castle's alarm sounded, but his strength waned. Arutha staggered down, finding a sword from a fallen comrade. He pushed toward town, the night alive with distant cries and flames. Fires raged below, the town a living ruin. Near the docks, a voice called from the ship.
Gods of mercy, is anyone there?
Arutha found a wounded man, Amos Trask, trapped and bleeding. Together, they escaped the burning ship, staggering down the quay as it exploded in a fiery inferno. Arutha awoke to concerned faces. Carline, Tully, and Fannin watched over him, Amos Trask standing nearby.
The man from the ship,
Arutha recalled, his voice raspy. Amos grinned.
Amos Trask. At your service, Highness. Thanks to you, I'm standing here.
Tully examined Arutha.
How do you feel?
Battered, but I'll survive.
Arutha replied, dizzy but relieved. Fannin grimly recounted the night's events. The town lay in ruins, the raid devastating.
It was the Surani,
he explained, their assault a suicidal mission of destruction. Amos shared his tale, the Surani's capture of his ship, their brutal efficiency.
It's a hard thing to lose one's ship, Highness,
he admitted, pain in his voice. Arutha offered him a place in Crydee, recognizing his courage and resourcefulness. As Amos left with Tully, Arutha found solace in Carlane's care, drifting into a restful sleep, the night's horrors finally fading as dawn broke. Chapter 9, The Siege of Crydee. Carlane lunged, her blade flashing low, aiming for Roland's midsection. He beat it aside, retreating a step and nearly losing his footing. She pressed, sensing an opening, but he laughed, twisted away, and caught her wrist. In a single motion, he spun her about and pinned her to him, his arm around her waist.
You overextend.
He chided.
Patience wins the kill.
He gave her a quick kiss on the cheek and shoved her playfully aside. She stumbled, growled, and raised her sword.
Rogue, you'll pay for that.
She advanced, circling him. With Duke Boric away, she'd worn Arutha down into letting Roland teach her swordplay, claiming she'd not faced the tyranny with embroidery needles. They dueled again, her fury igniting each strike until Roland found himself cornered. She lunged, he sidestepped and tapped her rump with the flat of his blade.
And don't lose your temper.
She turned, half laughing, half scowling.
You monster.
He smiled, then faltered. She stood radiant in a scandalous tunic and breeches, no longer the petulant girl he'd known. She advanced, sword leveled.
I yield,
he said, tossing his blade aside. They laughed, the past year of companionship hanging tenderly between them.
You are a rogue,
she said.
And you are fetching,
he replied with a grin. She pulled back, an expression of surprise on her face. Suddenly the sword fell from her fingers, and she grabbed him. Pulling him with surprising force, she kissed him passionately. A shout shattered the moment.
Attack! To your stations!
Roland swore and turned.
Remember what you were going to say,
he called. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the courtyard as Arutha surveyed the scene from the castle's battlements. The tension in the air was palpable, a heavy, almost tangible presence that weighed on the hearts of those who watched the approaching Tsurani forces. Below, the townsfolk and soldiers moved with purpose, their faces etched with the kind of grim determination that comes when one's home is under threat.
1,500, maybe 2,000.
Martin Longbow estimated, his voice steady despite the dire news.
Hard to be sure with the terrain, but more are certainly on their way.
Arutha nodded, his face a mask of composure.
It seems they've chosen Crydee as their focal point. No surprise, given our position.
Garden, standing beside him, added,
We should expect an attack at first light. If they don't try something before nightfall, they won't want to waste the cover of darkness.
Fannin, ever vigilant, peered into the distance.
We can only hope the defenses hold. The Tsurani are relentless once they set their eyes on a target.
Meanwhile, in the castle cellar, Carline paced back and forth, her frustration barely contained. The room was filled with the whispers of worried women, their eyes darting to the cellar door, hoping for news. But Carlane's mind was elsewhere, replaying the events of her training session with Roland. The kiss had been unexpected, a spark amidst the chaos, and it lingered in her thoughts despite the looming threat. Roland, having done his duty in ensuring Carlane's safety, now stood ready with the other soldiers, his mind a mixture of focus and concern. He had seen the look in Carlane's eyes, one that spoke of both anger and an unspoken promise. But now he had to put it aside. The enemy was at the gates, and there was no room for distraction. As the last light faded, the castle settled into a tense silence, broken only by the occasional shout from the walls. Amos Trask, ever the boisterous sea captain, moved among the townsfolk, keeping spirits up with his rough humour and tales of sea monsters and daring escapades. His presence was a balm of sorts, a reminder of resilience and the indomitable spirit of those who called Crydee home. In the woods, Martin and Garrett moved with the stealth of shadows, their mission clear, to harass and delay the Tsurani, buying precious time for the castle. The two men, seasoned and sharp-eyed, were a formidable team. Martin's hunter instincts were unparalleled, and Garrett, though often bemused by Martin's daring, trusted him implicitly. Their encounter with the Dark Brotherhood had been unexpected. The Mordel, dark kin of the elves, were a dangerous and unpredictable element. Yet Martin had turned the situation to their advantage, leading the Tsurani into a confrontation with the Brotherhood. It was a risky maneuver, but Martin thrived on such challenges. As they rested briefly, Garrett couldn't help but voice his unease.
Did you see that girl? Strange to find beauty among the Mordhel.
Martin chuckled softly.
Beauty is no stranger to danger, Garrett. Keep your wits about you. The forest is full of surprises.
Back at the castle, as night enveloped the land, Arutha gathered with his commanders. The plan was simple: hold the walls until reinforcements could arrive, or until the Tsurani tired of the siege. It was a daunting task, but Arutha was resolute. His people depended on him, and he would not fail them. Roland, standing to one side, caught Arutha's eye.
Your sister is safe, though not without protest,
he said, with a wry smile. Arutha returned the smile, a brief moment of levity amidst the seriousness.
She'll have to forgive us both when this is over. Until then, we have a battle to win.
As the night wore on, the castle became a bastion of hope amidst uncertainty. The soldiers stood ready, their nerves taut, but their spirits unbroken. Arutha, Garden, and Fannin reviewed their strategies, ensuring every man knew his place. In the cellar, as sleep finally claimed the weary women, Carlane lay awake, her thoughts a tumult of worry and resolve. Her brother and Roland were out there, facing an enemy that seemed unstoppable. But she knew the spirit of Crydee, the strength of its people. They would not yield easily. The first light of dawn was still hours away, but the defenders of Crydee were prepared. As the night deepened, so did their resolve. Each heart beat with the knowledge that they stood on the edge of a knife, but together they would hold fast. The Tsurani might come, but Crydee would not fall without a fight. From the distant woods, the rhythmic sounds of axes striking trees reverberated through the air, signaling the Tsurani's intent to craft scaling ladders. The Swordmaster and Huntmaster exchanged looks, their minds calculating the implications.
I'd never thought to hear myself say such, but I wish there'd been 4,000 Dark Brothers in the forest yesterday.
Martin mused aloud, his voice tinged with irony. Gardan, standing beside him, spat over the wall and nodded.
Still, you did well, Huntmaster. It is only fitting they should run afoul of each other.
With a dry chuckle, Martin added,
It is also a good thing the Dark Brothers kill on sight. Though I'm sure they do it out of no love for us, they do guard our southern flank.
Arutha's gaze was distant as he pondered aloud.
Unless yesterday's band was not an isolated case. If the Brotherhood is abandoning the Green Heart, we may soon have to fear for Tulan, Jonril, and Karsi.
I'm glad they've not parleyed,
Fannin put in, his voice firm.
If they should truce...
Martin shook his head with certainty.
The Moradhel will traffic only with weapons runners and renegades who will serve them for gold. Otherwise, they have no use for us. And by all evidence, the Tsurani are bent on conquest. The Moradhel are no more spared their ambition than we are.
Fannin turned his eyes to the mounting Tsurani force. Brightly colored standards, strange and exotic, lined the army's leading edge, each surrounded by soldiers in dazzling armor. A horn blared, and the Tsurani army faced the castle walls with an eerie, unified shout.
What is he doing?
Queried Roland, arriving just in time to witness a Sorani officer banging an axe against the castle gate. Martin, ever the keen observer, speculated.
I think he's ordering us to open up and quit the castle.
After a tense pause, Martin unshouldered his bow.
The Hadati hillmen of Yabun have rituals like this. They put great store by showing bravery in the face of an enemy. To touch one and live is more honorable than killing him.
He drew his bow, letting loose an arrow that landed deftly between the Sorani officer's legs. The officer halted, picked up the arrow, and snapped it in two, shouting defiance. Martin took another shot, this time slicing the plume from the officer's helmet, causing feathers to drift down like falling snow. Roland whooped in delight, and the defenders erupted in cheers. The Sorani officer, his dignity bruised, removed his helm in silent challenge. Fannin, a pragmatist, was unimpressed.
I will not allow the gates open over some childish contest.
Longbow grinned.
Then we'll change the rules.
He called for a fowling blunt, an arrow designed to stun rather than kill, and fired it at the officer. It struck the man's stomach, knocking him flat, and evoking cheers of outrage from the Sorani. As the officer stood, doubled over and retching, Arutha remarked dryly,
"So much for an officer's dignity."
With Fannin's command, the catapults were unleashed, sending a deadly barrage into the Sorani ranks, creating chaos and disarray. When a second volley landed, the Sorani broke and ran, regrouping just out of range.
They mean to wait us out,
Garden speculated. Arutha disagreed, pointing to a detachment moving forward.
They look to be readying an attack, but why with only a part of their force?
As the Sorani advanced, scaling ladders in tow, the defenders prepared. Arutha and his men braced themselves, knowing they faced a relentless foe determined to breach their walls. The Sorani charged, their brightly coloured shields a moving tapestry as they surged forward. Arutha and his men met them with arrows, stones, and fierce resolve. The castle walls became a battleground of chaos and death, with each side fighting with tenacity and skill. Despite their best efforts, the initial assault was repelled, Sorani retreating under the cover of night. Throughout the night, the Sorani attacks persisted with unwavering tenacity. With each assault, they sought to wear down the defenders, and the men of Crydee fought through exhaustion, holding their ground with sheer grit. As dawn broke, Arutha assessed the situation. Fannin had been gravely wounded, struck by a stray arrow during the night.
The wound is grave, but not yet mortal.
Tully explained.
If he survives the next day, he'll recover. But he won't be fit to command for weeks, maybe longer.
So Prince Arutha took command, appointing Gardan as his second. They were determined to withstand the siege, but Arutha knew they needed reinforcements.
We must send for aid,
Arutha instructed.
Order Barons Bellamy and Tolbert to strip their garrisons and take ship for Crydee at once.
The pragmatic Garden and cautious Algon expressed concerns, but Arutha was resolute.
If they keep this constant pressure upon us, how long can we withstand?
A few weeks, perhaps a month, no longer,
Garden admitted. The Sorani continued to press their advantage each night, their numbers seemingly limitless. Arutha, exhausted yet driven, fought alongside his men, rallying their spirits with his presence and courage. Amos Trask, the enigmatic seaman, observed the battle with a mix of admiration and disbelief.
Damn me, but they can fight,
he remarked, his respect for the Sorani grudging yet sincere. Despite the odds, the defenders held firm, fighting off each wave with grit and determination. The Sorani, unrelenting, attacked again and again, their numbers swelling with each assault. Arutha's plan to bring reinforcements was bold, but necessary. He knew that without additional forces, the defenders would eventually succumb to the Sorani's relentless onslaught. The siege of Crydee had become a relentless, grueling affair. For 12 consecutive nights, the Tsurani, with their alien customs and unfathomable tactics, launched their assaults against the castle walls, only to retreat at the break of dawn. Garden, the captain of the guard, watched the enemy with a mix of confusion and disdain.
They are strange,
he mused to Prince Arutha, who sat nearby, too exhausted to engage.
They cannot even fire their arrows once the ladders are up without risking their own.
Arutha, washing the blood and grime from his face, offered a weary smile as Carline, his sister, approached. Her presence, dressed in tunic and trousers, with a sword at her side, was a testament to the dire situation.
Someone must carry water and food,
she declared, her tone brisk. The women, from noble ladies to fishwives, had stepped into roles of necessity, tending to the needs of the men who fought tirelessly through the night. As the morning light spread over the battlements, Roland, ever vigilant, paced alongside the guards. His concern was palpable, especially with Carline's unexpected appearance on the wall.
What do you think you're doing up here?
He scolded, pulling her to safety. Her defiance softened, replaced by relief at seeing him unharmed. Their banter, laced with affection, was a rare solace amidst the chaos.
When this is over,
Roland began, but Carline silenced him with a finger on his lips.
Not now, Roland. Not now.
The afternoon brought an unexpected sighting. From the forest, 2 figures sprinted toward the castle, pursued by the clamour of battle. Roland recognized Longbow and Garrett, the foresters, their arrival heralding news of the Moradel, the Dark Elves, moving northward, inadvertently drawing Tsurani attention away from Crydee.
Arutha will be pleased,
Roland said, leading them to the prince. In the council room, Arutha listened intently as Longbow recounted the movements of the Moradel and Tsurani.
They seem to have little love for each other,
Longbow observed, noting the dead littering the woods. The Moradel, driven by hunger and desperation, posed a new variable in the siege.
If they attack the Tsurani while they focus on us, it might just give us the respite we need.
Garden reasoned, lifting his cup in a grim toast. As the sun set on the 8th day, without an attack, Arutha knew the Tsurani were readying for another assault.
They mount a full attack tonight,
he said, as the crimson light bathed the landscape. Garden affirmed the reports of Tsurani movements, and as the battle cries began, Arutha prepared his men for another night of bloodshed. Throughout the night, wave after wave of Tsurani warriors crashed against the defenses of Crydee. Arutha, covered in dirt and blood, coordinated the defenses with a dogged determination, knowing that dawn would bring a brief respite. Garden, ever the pragmatist, noted the fatigue in their voices.
If we hold one more time, the dawn will be upon us.
Roland's urgent voice interrupted their grim anticipation.
Arutha, there's something you should see.
In the dim light, Lewis, the castle's rat hunter, presented a dying ferret, its back broken. The significance hit Arutha like a bolt.
Sappers. The Tsurani must be digging under the east wall.
In the cellars, Carlina and the other women endured the tension with varying degrees of composure. The sudden sound of cracking stone and the sight of a Tsurani warrior emerging from the floor shattered their uneasy calm. Carline's sword flashed, her resolve unyielding as she ordered the women to flee. Lady Mana, with surprising ferocity, aided her former ward, striking down a Tsurani with a stone. As more Tsurani clambered through the breach, Carline stood defiant, resolute, at the base of the stairs. Lady Mana stayed close behind, unwilling to leave her princess to face the onslaught alone. Just as the Tsurani gathered to attack, Roland charged into the fray, his determination to defend Carline palpable. He barreled through the enemy, sending them tumbling back into the hole, his valiant cry swallowed by the chaos.
Roland!
Carline screamed, her voice echoing in the cellar, as guards rushed past her, engaging the enemy. Her heart sank as Roland disappeared from view, and a guard, firm but gentle, pulled her upstairs, her cries for Roland lingering in the air. Above, the soldiers of Crydee worked with feverish intensity to counter the Tsurani threat. Under Arutha's command, they dug a counter-tunnel, aiming to intercept and drive back the invaders before collapsing the passage. Amos Trask, ever the pragmatic strategist, concurred with Arutha's plan to prevent the Tsurani from regaining entry to the castle. As the soldiers broke through to the Tsurani tunnel, a chaotic melee erupted. Arutha stooped under the low ceiling, moved through the skirmish, switching his weapon to a knife for better maneuverability. The battle raged in the confined space, the air thick with the sounds of struggle and the scent of earth and blood. Arutha fought with determination, the fear of the collapsing earth above only fueling his resolve. Amos, always nearby, shouted commands, his voice cutting through the din.
Another 30 feet, lad.
He encouraged Arutha as they pressed the assault, fighting their way through the tunnel. Time blurred, the fight a montage of flashes and cries, until Amos called for straw and torches, igniting a blaze that forced a retreat from the doomed tunnel. With the tunnel sealed and smoke choking the air, the men of Crydee emerged into the cellar, exhausted and coughing. Arutha, soothed by a cup of water, was soon joined by Carline, her face a mask of concern.
Are you all right?
She asked, searching his eyes for reassurance. He nodded, but her question lingered.
Where's Roland?
Her voice was edged with worry. Arutha could only shake his head.
It was impossible to see down there,
he replied.
Let's hope he made it to the courtyard.
They ascended to the courtyard, where soldiers lay recovering from the smoke-filled chaos. The air was heavy with the acrid scent of burning straw, and the ground trembled with the remnants of the tunnel's collapse. Arutha's heart lifted when a soldier called out,
Squire Roland!
Carline rushed to him, finding Roland pale and wounded, yet alive. His bravado emerged through the pain.
What's this? You'd think I'd been killed?
He gestured weakly, grinning up at her.
You heartless monster.
Carline scolded, her relief mingling with her anger.
Playing tricks at a time like this.
Roland winced, his attempt to move halted by her gentle restraint.
Don't try to move,
she admonished, caught between relief and lingering fear. Nestled in her lap, Roland quipped,
I'd not move for half your father's duchy.
Carline, unable to suppress a smile, asked,
What were you doing throwing yourself upon the enemy like that?
Roland, sheepish, admitted,
In truth, I tripped coming down the steps and couldn't stop myself.
Carline laughed softly.
You are a liar, and I do love you,
she confessed, her heart full. As Arutha and Amos left the pair, they encountered Charles, the former Tsurani slave who had joined the fight. Arutha, struck by the man's courage, considered his potential as a true ally. Fannin limped slowly along the castle wall, leaning heavily on Father Tully for support. Though the wound to his back was healing, he still walked with great effort. Arutha stepped forward and gently took the swordmaster's other arm, offering quiet strength. Nearby stood Garden, Amos Trask, Martin Longbow, and several weary soldiers, their eyes lifting as Fannin approached.
What's this?
Fannin growled with a familiar spark.
Have you all gone daft and dragged me up here to take over again?
Arutha smiled and pointed toward the sea. On the southern horizon, dozens of sails caught the morning sun, their white gleam promising relief.
The fleet from Karsay and Tulan is nearing the south beaches. Today we strike. By tomorrow we'll push the Tsurani back, hard and far.
Fannin studied the enemy camp.
I hope you're right,
he said, quietly, then paused.
I've heard of your command, Arutha. You've done well. Your father would be proud.
Arutha tried to downplay it, but Fannin cut him off.
No false modesty. You've led well. You saw what I didn't. That caution would lose this war. You acted. That's what Crydee needed.
Tully snorted.
You're not old, Fannin. I was a priest when you still wore swaddling.
Laughter followed, easing the mood. Fannin allowed Tully to lead him away, offering one last smile. When they'd gone, Garden turned to Arutha.
The Swordmaster's right. You've honored your father.
Arutha gazed at the distant ships.
Only because I've had the best men at my side.
He straightened his posture.
Prepare the attack.
Carline stood on the south tower of the keep, Roland's arm wrapped tightly around her. He was pale from his wounds, but alive, and for now, that was enough.
We'll be done with the siege now the fleet's arrived,
he said, voice steady, though weariness lined his features. She leaned into him.
It has been a nightmare.
He smiled down at her.
Not entirely. There's been some compensation.
You are a rogue,
she said, softly, then kissed him. When they parted, she teased.
Perhaps your reckless charge was just a ploy to win my sympathy.
He feigned offense.
Lady, I am mortally wounded.
She gripped him tighter.
I was so afraid, Roland, not knowing if you were alive in that tunnel.
Her voice trailed off as her eyes drifted toward the north tower. There, on the second floor, was Pug's window, the chimney above it now silent, where once it had choked with smoke from his studies. Roland followed her gaze and nodded.
I know. I miss him too. And Thomas.
A long sigh escaped her.
It feels like a different life. I was just a girl then, with a girl's dreams about love.
She paused.
Someone once said love can arrive like a sea wind, or grow quietly from the roots of friendship.
Father Tully.
Roland said, "Oh."
He was right. Either way, as long as you love, you're alive.
Below, soldiers readied for a final push.
Do you think this is all over?
Carline asked.
No.
Roland said, holding her tightly.
They will come again. This war is fated to last a long time.
Across the lines of battle, Kasumi of the Shinsawai, force leader of the Kanazawai clan and general of the Blue Wheel Party, stood watching the distant figures on Crydee's battlements. Though their faces were indistinct, he knew them well by presence alone. The fierce young leader who rallied the defenders, the towering black warrior, the green-clad scout who moved like a ghost through the forests, and the grinning swordsman with the curved blade. They were worthy enemies, and he saluted them, silently, with respect. Chingari, his senior strike leader, approached.
Force leader, the barbarian fleet approaches. They'll land within the hour.
Kasumi said nothing at first, eyes fixed on the scroll in his hands, sealed with his father's chop. He'd read it a dozen times already. With quiet certainty, he spoke.
We march, break camp, and assemble the men. The Kanazawai have withdrawn from the alliance. The Blue Wheel Party leaves this war.
Chingari scowled.
We quit now the tunnel is gone? There is no shame,
Kasumi replied.
The war party remains. Let them carry on alone.
He looked again at the castle, its clever defenses, its defenders' tenacity.
These people are no mere barbarians,
he murmured.
We've much to learn from them.
The political blow to the warlord would be immense. Without the Blue Wheel clans, the campaign would stall. The war's course had shifted, undeniably. Kasumi crumpled the scroll and tossed it into the brazier. As it burned, so did his doubts. His clan had chosen a new path, one destined for the great game of politics and power. The Magician Apprentice by Raymond E. Feist. Thank you for listening to our retelling of Magician Apprentice by Raymond E. Feist, the first book of the Riftwar Saga. Please consider subscribing if you enjoy our work. Other retellings, books, and series are available on our channel. and via the links in the description below.